Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Let's Start Story on What If Naruto Became Strongest Alien and Had Harem with Erza. So do 4 blue hearts. Comment, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video, and please share with your friends and watch till end. Also check out Patreon for I have upload Naruto X Rias and Akino uncensored spicy version, link in description. Dreary and weakened. A woman with long blonde hair slowly stalked her way in a single direction, her mind in a trance-like state as she walked forward. The woman in question was Fo. Our lack of better words, a goddess with a curvaceous figure that didn't seem possible for any normal woman. Even her choice of fashion further elevated her beauty, as she wore a loose kimono with fur ning on the top while also having flower designs all over it as well as zigzag patterns on its edges. Yet her most striking feature was the hood which covered her head and was adorned with an upward crescent moon with a gem on top as well as a pair of wings on each side. Though one might ask who this woman was. Or maybe ask why said woman seemed to be in such a vulnerable state. The answers to these questions were quite simple. As the woman wasn't actually a woman in the conventional sense. No, she was one of the 5 dragon gods known as Selene, the dragon that crosses dimensions. A powerful Reacher who was currently in a weakened state due to just giving birth to the child cradled within her arms. The child was her son Naruto, who she had conceived with a man from this dimension named Minato Namikaze. A man who had unintentionally stolen her heart and made the cold and ruthless dragon actually care for a human. A race which she had believed for centuries to be a nuisance and served as nothing more than a form of entertainment. Yet Minato was different from any human she had encountered before. He was strong, kind and above all else loved her unconditionally despite knowing the truth about her. Selene had to admit she never intended to fall for a human or even give birth to another child. However, instead of having her fun within this dimension and leaving, Selene found herself slowly building a life here with Minato. Unfortunately, as the weakened dragon stopped walking and looked at the ground, her chest tightened. Since laying on the ground in a pool of blood was her lover and father of her child. Why? Selene asked in a hollow voice, as she hovered over the body of the man she loved. The Hokage's duty is to protect everyone. A shallow wheeze escaping Minato's lungs. The man slowly reached up with his hand towards Selene and Naruto. Can I see our son? Lowering herself softly onto the ground by Minato's side, Selene adjusted Naruto carefully enough so the man could see the newborn. He has your eyes. Minato let a bloodily smile slip, as he rested his hand onto Naruto's tiny body. But he has his mother's beauty. Minato began before coughing up some blood. I'm sure he will be a ladies' man one day. Selene, I don't have long, so let me apologize. I won't be there for you and Naruto like I promised I would, so I hope you can forgive me. Tears building up with the eyes of the dragon revered as a god, Selene shook her head. Don't apologize to me, love, I should have protected you. Now don't blame yourself, you were busy giving birth to our son. Just please take care of each other. Minato, you know the moon is especially beautiful tonight. Minato gasped out, as his blurry vision gazed upwards. Selene gritted her teeth. As the moon dragon god she was always drawn to the moon. Yet for once she had to disagree with Minato, as she couldn't find anything beautiful about this situation. I love you both. To declared before drifting off as the sound of his heartbeat became silent to Selene's heightened hearing. I love you too. Selene whispered in a low voice, while the woman could hear the sound of footsteps approaching from behind. So recollecting herself and holding Naruto close to her chest, she quickly prepared for anything. Selene. The voice of the 3rd Hokage Hiruzen spoke up. I'm sorry. Minato died a hero's sacrifice. Turning around to face the man, Selene observed that the aged leader was also holding a newborn child. Yet the small bundle within his arms was a tiny little redhead. I'm in no mood for your pity. Human. Selene shot back with venom in her voice, as she stood tall to face the man. Noticing a member of the village's Anbu standing behind Hiruzen while holding a deceased woman who smelt like the child the Hokage was holding. We all lost something today, Selene, and I understand your anger, but if Minato hadn't sealed the Kyuubi within this child in my arms, then more lives would have been lost. And if you could have held back the beast long enough so I could recover from childbirth, then I could have killed the so-called Kyuubi myself. Hiruzen kept a die resolve and merely locked eyes with the powerful dragon. What's done is done, but now I must know. What are your plans now that Minato has passed? Gazing up to the sky and watching the moon carefully, Celine didn't have to think of a response for long. The moon in this dimension used to always allure me with its beauty, but now it's just an empty reminder of what I've lost tonight. So I'll be taking my son back to my home dimension so we can live in peace. And that's all. Hiruzen asked in a cautious tone, as he knew of the dragon god's power along with her wrath. If you're afraid of me doing anything nefarious, I'm actually insulted human. Minato died protecting this village, so I will simply take my leave, as there is nothing here to keep me and my son within this dimension. I understand, but you do know you're always welcome within this village. Hiruzen replied, which didn't earn much of a reaction from Celine. Don't expect to see me again, human. Celine replied before turning away and holding her hand outward. Aqua Era. Celine called out before creating a portal in the air beside her and walking through with her son still in her arms. 8 years later. I want to leave. The voice of Naruto roared in defiance, as his deep blue eyes glared upwards with unwavering conviction. Folding her arms and scowling, Celine flashed a few of her sharp dragonic teeth in anger. And I've already told you 1,000 times, you're forbidden from leaving this temple. You can't keep me locked in here forever. Naruto challenged with vigor, showing he wasn't afraid of his mother. I can and I will. Celine fired back as she cracked the floor with a small amount of her magical power. Trying her hardest to intimidate her child. Why? Naruto yelled loudly as he spiked his own magical power, making smaller cracks in the ground like his mother. Because I'm not going to lose you as well. But I'm a moon dragon like you. I'm strong. Naruto yelled back, as Celine snarled at the blonde's words. Since it was true that Naruto, unlike any child she had given birth to before, had inherited her type of magic, making him incredibly strong. However, Celine was smart enough to know she wasn't invincible and Naruto was far from her level of power. And what would happen if another dragon god or acknowledge found you? Celine yelled loudly as she stomped her foot onto the ground. I'm not afraid of them. You should be. Celine roared loudly, as her voice started to shake the temple. They are dragons that rival my power. Or do you think you've grown stronger than me? No. Then stop arguing with me. Celine cut in with absolute authority as she crossed her arms and turned her back to her son. Gritting his teeth and accepting defeat, Naruto lowered his head. Fine. But can you at least show me some new magic? Celine lifted her brow and looked over her shoulder. And what of the spell I already showed you? Holding his hand out, Naruto merely allowed a bright white flame to ignite within his palm. I've already got this one down. Smirking at the small display, Celine couldn't argue her son's natural talent. So you're able to use Moonlight Flame. I would be impressed if you weren't my own flesh and blood. Allowing the flame to disappear, Naruto looked up to his mother with an eager expression. Well, if you won't let me leave this temple, how about you train me some more? Make me a proper moon dragon. Celine hummed as she brought a finger to her cheek and thought over her son's request. Normally she would teach him a few things here and there to keep his attention away from leaving, but Naruto did show incredible potential. So it was a rather alluring idea to train Naruto in everything she knew. I can't argue that having enough our moon dragon of my strength would be very helpful for my future plans. Oblivious to his mother's rather ominous tone, Naruto was more than excited to at least learn more about his magic. So you'll finally be serious in training me? A wide toothy grin gracing her lips, Celine slowly nodded her head. Only if you promise to always listen to me and never question your mother ever again. Yeah, okay, sure. Naruto replied quickly, which didn't sit right with Celine. No, that won't do. I want you to actually be sincere or I won't show you any more magic. Rolling his eyes in annoyance, Naruto nodded. Okay, fine. I promise I will always listen and not question you. Good. Celine began as she started to walk away. In that case, let's get started on learning some real magic. Quickly running after his mother with excitement pumping throughout his body, Naruto was already forgetting about wanting to escape the temple and explore the outside world. As his young track mind was completely used on becoming a powerful dragon like his mother. 4 years later, Naruto aged 12. Sitting in a large traditional hot spring, Naruto rested his back against a large stone as his eyes gazed up to the large moon in the sky overhead. feeling a sense of ease as the warm water soothed his body while the moon left him feeling completely relaxed. "Lord Naruto, would you like more to drink?" a soft voice asked, which made Naruto glance to the side, observing one of his mother's followers holding a tray of sake. Reaching out and accepting a cup from the woman, Naruto gave a friendly smile. "Thank you," the young dragon replied, showing his kindness and manners. "It's my pleasure," the follower declared as she stepped back. Taking a small sip of the sake, Naruto savored the flavor as he had developed a small taste for the stuff thanks to his mother. As daily bathing in sake was a frequent habit of Celine's that she had passed down onto her son. "So tell me, Naruto," the voice of Celine spoke up, which caused Naruto to look across the hot spring to his mother, who was casually sipping on her own sake and submerged into the water. "What do you think of this sake?" "It's good," Naruto replied as he lifted his brow. "But it's not the usual sake you drink. I can taste a distinct difference." "That's a good observation, it's sake I have kept over the years," Celine informed as she seemed to gaze off to the side. "It originated from your father's home village, in fact this was his favorite sake." This information grabbed Naruto's attention. It was rare for Celine to ever mention his father, and when she did so it was in very small details. In honesty, the only things Naruto knew of his father was his name and that he was dead. "You don't talk about dad much," Naruto spoke up softly as he tried to see if he could get anything from his mother. No, I don't," Celine replied in a rather bland and monotone voice. "Would you like to?" Naruto asked, which did earn his mother's attention. "I mean, I know dad's name and that he was a human from a different dimension, but I don't really know much else." "What was he like? Was he strong? Kind? How did he fall in love with a dragon god? I want to know more about him." Sighing to herself and motioning for her followers to leave, Celine slowly walked over to Naruto and quickly took a seat by her son. Then as they were alone, both mother and son gazed up at the moon. "Minato was very kind," Celine began, which surprised Naruto as she was actually speaking about his father. "You definitely inherited my looks and powers, but without Sion, your kindness comes from your father. It was always something I couldn't comprehend." "What do you mean?" "I had traveled to your father's dimension 14 years ago in a time when all the lands were engaged in a bloody battle called the Third Great Shinobi War. At this time I was just enjoying myself and had made my own temple within one of the lands locked in the conflict. As such I quickly found the war knocking on my new doorstep and I threw myself into the war in retaliation." Celine explained as Naruto now found himself completely absorbed in his mother's tale. "With my powers it was quite easy for me to annihilate any human who was foolish enough to challenge me. Yet one day when I was ambushed by a group of warriors from a village called Iwa, your father appeared. He didn't know at the time I was powerful enough to defend myself, but he jumped forward without hesitation and slayed every enemy within the area. It was an incredible display of power for a human that instantly grabbed my attention. But that wasn't what created my interest with your father. Then what was it? It was his kindness, as I had watched him ruthlessly and brutally kill those humans. However, when the battle was over he suddenly displayed compassion and regret for those who had been killed. It was such an odd thing to witness. An overwhelming slaughter that was over in seconds, but the one responsible was such a kind-hearted person. It was a strange thing to see and made me interested in learning more about your father. So because he caught my interest I followed him from that day forward, fighting for his village and watching as he quickly became a hero and leader of his village. Not much longer after that the war had come to an end and I ended up pregnant with you. Then, well, I think you know how the story ends. Dad sounds like he was a really amazing person." Celine nodded in response. "I have never cared for a human, let alone loved one as much as I loved your father." Naruto smiled and looked at his mother. "You know, we should talk more about Dad. I've never seen your eyes with so much life in them." Taken off guard by her son's words, Celine didn't even realize it. But she was at ease talking about Minato. Something she thought she would never be able to do. Maybe, but don't get your hopes up. I just feel sentimental today. You know, maybe one day I'll find love like you and Dad did. Then I can tell you all about her and you can tell me more about Dad." Laughing and pressing her hand onto her son's head, Celine ruffled Naruto's hair at his comment. Please, your mommy will chew up and swallow any little girl that even thinks about trying to have a relationship with you. Naruto rolled his eyes. First I can't leave the temple and now I can't even have a girlfriend. You're not overbearing at all. A tick mark appeared on Celine's forehead, as she started to put more and more pressure onto Naruto's head, making the blonde slowly sink into the water. Don't get smart with your mother, brat. Flailing his arms and trying to fight back, Naruto quickly found his mother's hair and tugged on the woman to bring her down with him. An action that quickly led to the mother and son dragon duo getting a little destructive with their magic in frustration, but this was a normal occurrence for the two that many within the temple just accepted. 6 years later, Naruto age 18. Standing with his arms crossed and not even sweating, Naruto looked around the area that had shown clear signs of a serious battle. If the one-sided ass-kicking that Naruto just gave to his mother's elite squad could be considered a battle. Sorry Yuko, Hakun and Mimi, but I've decided I'm gonna finally explore the world and you can't keep me here anymore. Naruto explained to his mother's elite squad known as the Moonlit Beauty Gods. Yet all three women were completely unconscious from the swift battle with the young blonde. Oh, a hollow voice spoke from behind Naruto, which made Naruto freeze and slightly sweat. Is that so, Naruto? And tell me, who gave you permission to leave the temple? Tightening his fists and slowly turning around, Naruto was met with the rather displeased gaze of his mother. I'm sorry mom, but I'm sick of always staying locked in this temple. I want to go out and experience the outside world. Naruto explained as he held his hands out. I've tried to wait and hope you would let me go one day, but I can't wait around anymore. So let me get this straight, Naruto, you're not only breaking my rules about leaving the temple, but you're also breaking the promise you made to me all those years ago. Hearing the tone of his mother's voice, Naruto had to steady his resolve and keep his composure. Yes, and I'm sorry that I can't keep that promise anymore. Celine's eyes hardened and Naruto could feel her magical power growing. You know I just won't let you walk away. Naruto took a deep breath and prepared his magic. Mom, you're gonna have to let me go one day. You can't keep me caged forever. I believe we have had this argument before, Naruto. We have, but I'm much stronger than I used to be. Naruto replied, which caused Celine to smile. Don't think for a second you can beat me, Naruto, just because I've trained you. It's 100 years too soon for you to defeat me. Celine revealed as more and more of her magical power began to leak out. Naruto nodded with a soft smile. I never said I would try to beat you, just outsmart you. Aqua Era. Naruto yelled as he created a portal behind his back to an unknown area. I just wanted to make sure I got to say goodbye to you before I left. Oh no you don't. Celine yelled as she ran forward, which made Naruto quickly jump back into the portal. I love you mom and I promise to come see you soon. That's a promise I won't break. Naruto replied as he vanished into the portal before closing it shut with his magic, leaving Celine alone with no idea where her son has traveled off to. You brat. Celine growled in a low voice, as her anger was boiling at this point. You better not get yourself killed. 1 year later, Naruto age 19. Sitting on a small boat bobbing up and down on the rough ocean waves, Naruto kept his vision focused on the destination before him. A year has gone by since he had escaped from living under his mother's thumb and Naruto had experienced more of the world than he could ever imagine. The young half-dragon had also grown even more over the last year, as he was now a solid 6 feet tall and completely covered in lean muscle. Though his style of fashion didn't change from his time with his mother, as he wore an open light purple kimono that revealed his chiseled chest, but his lower body was left concealed with body wrapping. Though the most striking feature was the wooden practice sword that Naruto had resting on his shoulder. This wasn't just a simple piece of wood, however, as it was a special magical item that Naruto had found on his travels. This particular item had the ability to have magical power transferred into it for 2 purposes. The first was to strengthen the durability of the item to make it much stronger than an average piece of wood. The second ability was to grow and shrink the sword to either increase its range or make it easier for traveling. Though the main reason Naruto used this weapon was to avoid using his moon dragon magic, since he didn't want his mother to catch wind of him and track him down so she could drag him back to the temple he grew up in. Since he was having a lot of fun outside of the temple and didn't want to go back home anytime soon. Which was a big reason why Naruto was traveling on a small boat instead of just flying where he wanted to go, as it was easier to lay low this way. Besides, Naruto was a dragon, not a dragon slayer, so he didn't have any issue with motion sickness. Currently the blonde was making his way to Galuna Island, a place that held an ancient temple to the moon. Naruto, being the son of the moon dragon god, wanted to visit this temple, as he had a small inkling his mother had some hand in Galuna Island before fleeing to Giltina to escape Aknowledge. So since his mother obviously wouldn't come looking for him here, he felt why not try and see if he can learn anything about his mother. So that's Galuna Island. Naruto mumbled as he gazed at the large island in the distance, taking note of the purple moon cascading over the island. You don't have to be a moon dragon to know something isn't right with that moon. Standing upright on the boat, Naruto studied the strange moon and wondered if this phenomenon was normal for the island. However, upon further inspection, Naruto could identify that a layer of magical residue was responsible for the moon's sudden color. Now I really want to explore this island, Naruto mumbled with excitement, as his boat eventually reached the beach of the island. Yet as his boat arrived, his nose began to pick up a cluster of smells, one of which heavily resembled a dragon and that made Naruto's eyes grow wide. It's not mom's scent, but if a dragon is here I have to be careful, Naruto began softly as he started to walk deep into the island in the direction of the scent of the dragon. Eventually finding himself standing in the brush line with a small village gathered together. Finding a group of demonic-looking people all surrounding 4 unfamiliar humans and a cat. What's going on here? Naruto mumbled as he saw a pink-haired teenager that the dragon smell was coming from talking to a girl with scarlet hair in knight armor. All the while a half-naked boy and a blonde girl holding a cat observed silently. Yet as Naruto watched from his concealed location, the girl with scarlet hair quickly snapped her eyes to his location and summoned a sword that she threw right at Naruto, forcing the half-dragon to raise his wooden sword to block the sudden attack from piercing his head. Hey, what the hell, you psychopath? Don't just go slinging swords at people, Naruto yelled as he revealed himself to everyone by spiking the sword onto the ground. Why are you spying on us? The girl yelled back, which made Naruto grind his teeth. I just landed on this island and I wanted to explore the moon temple. I wasn't expecting to find anyone here, Naruto replied in a stern voice, which made the girl understand the situation. Oh, I'm sorry for the misunderstanding, please forgive me, the girl began before taking a bow. I'm Erza Scarlet of Fairy Tail, by the way. Resting his sword on his shoulder and walking forward, Naruto gave a friendly wave. Nice to meet you, Erza, I'm Naruto Namikaze. Erza nodded and held her hands out. And these are my comrades Natsu, Happy, Gray and Lucy. I see, it's a pleasure to meet all of you, but do you know where the moon temple is? Naruto asked. Oh, that old building, Natsu asked as he laughed nervously. Yeah, I totally trashed that place. It's just a pile of rocks now. Falling flat on his face, Naruto couldn't believe he wasted all this time to find out some idiot had destroyed the temple. You gotta be kidding me. I came all this way for nothing. Hey, sorry. Natsu chuckled. That's flame brain for you, Gray added with a small laugh as he stood over top of Naruto. Yeah, sorry about Natsu, Lucy giggled. Aw man, this is a total pain. Naruto groaned as he rubbed the side of his neck. Now I wasted my time and don't have anything else to do. Everyone listening to Naruto vent felt sorry for the blonde's bad timing, but nah. Su suddenly got very interested the moment his nose began to catch wind of Naruto's scent. Hold up, why do you smell like a dragon? Natsu yelled loudly as he pointed at Naruto. A dragon, Lucy and Happy gasped together. Like another dragon slayer, Gray chimed in. Erza locked eyes with Naruto, who seemed deep in thought, yet to her and everyone's surprise the blonde gave a friendly laugh and smile. I've got no idea what you're talking about. What? The fairy tale wizards yelled, which made Naruto snicker. Yup, I'm just a wandering wizard looking for fun. Naruto lied as he didn't know he's people and he didn't want anyone learning about his status as an actual dragon. But tell me, what's going on with this island? I can tell there is some magical residue over the island that's changing the moon's color. Huh, Gray, Natsu and Lucy all mumbled while Erza merely nodded. So you've figured it out as well. You must be quite the wizard, Erza complimented before looking up. Grow up had been using the moon drip ceremony to resurrect a demon. Me and my guild mates have stopped those individuals and I was about to break the barrier over this island. Ah, I see, so you have things under control. In that case I'm gonna go find what's left of the temple and see if there is anything that isn't destroyed. Naruto mumbled in an annoyed voice as he glared at Natsu. Erza nodded and folded her arms. Well, if you would like to wait for me to clear up this magical residue, I can at least guide you to what's left of the temple. Giving Erza a wide grin, Naruto tightly grabbed his wooden sword. That would be great, Erza. But in that case, why don't I help you with this magical residue? I would appreciate any help you could provide, but me and Natsu should be able to handle this. Erza explained, which caused Naruto to simply step back and observe, as he didn't want to show his magic anyway and he was curious to see Erza and Natsu's magic. Alright, show me what you guys got then. Naruto cheered as he quickly found out that Erza used some time of magic to equip different kinds of weapons and armor, while Natsu was a fire dragon slayer, which explained the dragon's scent. The two then used a combined attack where Natsu used his fire to propel Erza's weapon high into the air to shatter the magical residue. From there the moon was on full display for everyone, and as Naruto himself gazed up to the massive orb in the sky, he was almost sure his mother would have been drawn to this island. However, what was truly interesting was that the island inhabitants were demons who had forgotten what they truly were. This made Naruto think back to the Onas back at the temple he grew up in, further cementing the idea that his mother had her dragonic hands in this island at one time or another. Yet as the island's inhabitants celebrated the return of their memories with the fairy tale wizards, Erza quickly took Naruto off to the side and down a path into the jungle. Then as the two made their way through the winding foliage, Erza suddenly decided to voice her curiosity about Naruto's intentions. So why exactly are you wanting to see this temple? Erza asked in a rather straightforward and blunt tone. Watching his words carefully, Naruto merely shrugged his shoulders. Since he figured he could be somewhat honest with Erza. I was looking into some of my family's past and I think this island might have connections to my family. What do you hope to find about your family? Just what they were like when this island's temple was built. Naruto began, as his true goal was to learn more about his mother from a source that wasn't also his mother. I see. Erza trailed off as she looked at the sword Naruto was still holding. Tell me if you don't mind, but what type of magic do you use? You said you were a wizard and I noticed the wooden sword you have. So I was curious if your magic involved swordsmanship. Holding his weapon out for further inspection, Naruto merely grinned awkwardly. I know a few tricks, but this is just a magical item I use when I need to defend myself. I'm absolutely awful with a sword, but I can brute force most things. Erza merely nodded and summoned a sword of her own. I myself use requip magic that lets me use different weapons and armors. In fact, if you ever wanted, I could show you a few things with a sword. Well, I have quite a lot of free time and nothing to do. Especially after I'm done here, since this is my only real destination in mind. So since I have no home to go back to, maybe I could let you show me a few things. At this, Erza lifted her brow. So you're just wandering around with no home or real goal? Yup. I took off from my actual home a year ago and have just been exploring different places and meeting new people. Eventually I caught wind of this island and ended up here. Will you return back to your home? Erza asked, which made Naruto snicker. One day maybe. I did make a promise after all, but mom kept me locked away for years. So I wanna have some adventures before she catches me. Catch you? Oh yeah, about that. Naruto mumbled as he rubbed the back of his head. I sorta ran away fr. Home, and my mom didn't really approve of me leaving. She's a super powerful woman and would totally kick my ass and drag me home if she found me. Erza giggled at the blonde's words. She sounds like a very protective mother. Overbearing is more like it. Naruto groaned in annoyance. But I'm the only family she has left, so I can see why she wants to keep me close. She's just gotta realize I ought to live my own life and spread my wings a little. Well, if you have nowhere to go, why not come with us to Fairy Tale? Erza asked as the wind blew throughout the forest, shaking the trees from side to side, allowing the smallest amount of moonlight to illuminate over Erza. Something that made Naruto's eyes grow wide as he was mesmerized by the scarlet-haired girl's beauty under the moon. Like join your guild? Erza simply nodded with a soft smile. Yes. I don't know. Naruto began with a skeptical voice. I've spent a majority of my life locked in one place. I kinda want some freedom. Quote, as someone who knows what it means to be locked away without any freedom, trust me. A guild is different. It's a home you can come and go to at any time. Naruto was intrigued by what Erza meant by not having freedom and being locked away. However, right now he was more focused on the decision to join a guild. So I wouldn't be chained down by anything or anyone. Naruto asked, which made Erza smile. You wouldn't have any chains holding you from going where you wanted or doing what you wished. However, you will make lifelong bonds that you will always cherish. Erza replied softly, as she saw Naruto's eyes ignite with excitement, showing that she had finally won the blonde over. You know what? I think I will tag along and join your guild. It could be fun. Naruto replied with a cheerful smile, which made Erza hold her hand out. Then let me be the first person to welcome you to the Fairy Tail Guild. Accepting Erza's hand, Naruto felt a small spark the moment their hands touched. Yet as they held the handshake, Naruto gave a rather toothy grin. Well, why don't we check out this temple so we can go back to everyone else? That sounds like a good plan. Erza replied as she and Naruto eventually made their way to what was left of the temple. A sight that made Naruto whistle and rub his head. Man, Natsu really did a number on this place. Naruto observed as the temple was indeed nothing except a pile of rocks. That's Natsu for you, but look over there. It seems that piece of rock has some form of writing on it. Walking closer and inspecting a large fallen stone slab, Naruto did notice an inscription that was in an old language. Yet there was one word in particular that stuck out to him among everything. Selene. Naruto mumbled with the faintest of smiles, getting the final confirmation his mother was involved with this island. Selene. Erza repeated as she stood by Naruto's side. What does that mean? I can't make any of this out. Selene was sort of a god that the people of this island worshipped. She apparently had strong ties to the moon and this island. Naruto explained in a half-truth, as he wasn't going to tell the complete truth, which was that his Veral 100-year-old dragon mother used to live here. Does it say anything about your family? Erza asked, which made Naruto laugh and shake his head. No, and I'm afraid with how damaged this temple is I won't find anything. But that's okay. Naruto replied with a positive attitude as he quickly turned back to where they came from. But let's head back to the village, I've seen all I need to see here. Erza nodded. I'm sure the others will be excited to hear you're joining the guild. Naruto smiled and started to walk with Erza, as after spending 18 years being locked away and 1 year traveling without a purpose, the young dragon was finally making his way down the path that led to his future. So you wanna fight? Natsu asked in a rather excited voice, which did earn a long sigh from Naruto. The half-dragon had been traveling to the hometown of the Fairy Tail Guild with his newfound companions. An experience that had allowed Naruto to better acquaint himself with each of the wizards. Quickly learning Natsu had a one-track mind and was obsessed with fighting strong opponents and would not stop asking him for a fight. Yet it was better than Natsu constantly asking why Naruto smelled like a dragon. A subject he eventually dropped for the meantime. Can't you just let it go, Natsu? We are almost back to the guild. Lucy tried to reason, which made Naruto look at his fellow blonde. In his short time with the young celestial spirit wizard, Naruto had learned she was quite level-headed and a kind person, who seemed to try and be the voice of reason on Natsu's shoulder. I wouldn't waste your breath, Lucy. That idiot is too thick-headed to listen. Gray chimed in, which made Naruto look at the ice wizard. Coming to learn, Gray was a calm and laid-back person who loved to butt heads with Natsu, while also having a strange habit to strip completely naked. What did you call me, jerk? Natsu roared as he glared at Gray. Gray quickly puffed out his chest and pressed his torso into Natsu. You heard me, dumbass. Boys. Erza began in a low and commanding voice, which quickly forced both teens to stop their potential fight from sheer fear of the scarlet-haired knight. Something that made Naruto snicker and look at the girl who had invited him along this little journey in the first place. He had learned she was strong and polite, but there was something more to her. Naruto himself couldn't place it into words, but it was almost like his dragonic instincts were telling him to stay close to Erza. Since there was this layer to Erza that was hidden and he wanted to scratch through to the bottom of it. So trusting his instincts, he did just that. So Naruto The tiny voice of Happy began, as the small cat flew on top of his head. Are you excited to see the guild? Having all eyes on him, Naruto got a little nervous and rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Yeah, for sure. I've heard a lot about guilds, but I've never really been inside one, let alone going as far as trying to become a member. So I'm looking forward to this. Fairy Tail is awesome, Natsu declared as he started to shadow box around the blonde. There are all these totally strong people you get to fight. I'm not really trying to fight anyone. Naruto replied with a laugh, as he never really cared for fighting like his new pink-haired friend did. Don't let Natsu twist your expectations of the guild. Erza spoke up as she glared at the fire user. The guild is more of a tight-knit family where you can have a laugh and find some jobs to make money. Yeah, what Erza said. I haven't been a member for long myself. But I love the guild. Lucy chimed in, which made Naruto nod. Well, I'm glad I have a fellow newbie with me to help fit in. Naruto replied as the group quickly found themselves walking through the main entrance into Magnolia. An experience that caused Naruto's eyes to light up with wonder as he took in all the sights around him. Erza herself smiled as she saw Naruto's amazement of the town she and many fairy tale wizards called home. I take it you're impressed with the town. Yeah, it's huge. I've been in a few towns this last year, but I always love seeing new unfamiliar sights. Naruto replied with a sense of wonder, showing the effect being locked away by his mother for so many years had on him. I mean, just look at the size of that building. Is that the guild? Erza giggled and shook her head. No, that's Magnolia's cathedral, the guild is on the other end of the town. Hitting his fist against the palm of his hand, Naruto nodded and made an, oh, sound. You know, if you're impressed with the buildings you should see Magnolia during a festival. Gray spoke up, which made Naruto look over his shoulder. This town has festivals. I've always wanted to go see a festival. Naruto admitted. Yeah, Magnolia has lots of festivals. We are even getting close to the yearly Fantasia parade. Happy cheered from his spot on Naruto's head, looking up and trying to see the small cat on his head. Naruto lifted his brow in interest. What's that? It's something our guild puts on every year during the Harvest Festival. Gray explained. In fact, this won't only be your first Fantasia parade, but Lucis as well. Erza added in with a wide smile. I'll make sure to tell the master to include you both front and center this year. Lucy quickly held her hands up nervously. Oh no, you don't have to do that for me. Natsu laughed and slung his arm around the bashful blonde. Don't be silly, Lucy, you're a fairy tale wizard now. You absolutely gotta do the parade. But if you want, you can join in on me and Happy's float. We always go all out. Gray scoffed. If going all out means your float exploding in fire like it did last year, then sure. Hey, our float was a crowd favorite last year. Natsu yelled out, which caused Happy to sigh. Natsu, for the last time those people were screaming in fear, not cheering for us. Which is why the master banned Rom having a large float again in the parade. Erza added in, which made Naruto laugh. So in other words, me and Lucy should steer clear of Natsu. The moon dragon began as everyone else except for Natsu just nodded. That would be best. But if you're nervous about joining the parade, I would be more than happy to help either of you. Erza revealed, which made both Naruto and Lucy smile. Thanks, Erza. Lucy replied. Yeah, I might just take you up on that offer. Naruto added in, as his heightened hearing began to pick up on small whispers from all around. Hearing phrases like, I wonder if they know, or, I heard it was Phantom Lord, and many more. Yet as the whispers grew louder and fingers began to be pointed at the group, even those with regular hearing could tell something wasn't right. We should hurry to the guild. Erza suddenly spoke up as she started to jog at a modest pace. I'm right behind you. Gray called out as he and Natsu both took off after her. What's going on? Lucy mumbled, while Naruto had a rather hardened look on his face. Nothing good. The half-dragon replied before running after Erza, which caused Lucy to follow. The group moving at a rather fast pace eventually made their way to where the guild hall was visible in the distance. Yet something wasn't right with the building, and that only caused the group to run even faster. Eventually making their way before the historic building to find it impaled with large metallic pillars in all directions. A horrific sight for everyone, including Naruto, who was smart enough to tell something wasn't right. In F.A. court. Naruto swore he could smell the faintest scent of another user of Dragon Slayer magic like Natsu. What happened to our guild? Natsu yelled with pure rage. It was Phantom. A soft voice from behind the group began, which made everyone look back to find Fairy Tail's famous pinup girl Mirajan. Was anyone injured? Erza quickly asked, which made Mirajan shake her head. No, the attack happened last night while nobody was around. Thank goodness. Lucy gasped with a sigh of relief. And where is the master? Are we fighting back? Natsu asked quickly, which made Mirajan frown. The master is in the guild's basement with everyone else, but well, you should just talk to him yourself. Mirajan explained as she suddenly took notice of Naruto. Also, who is your friend? He's a new friend who wishes to join the guild. Erza explained. Naruto gave Mirajan a small wave. Hi, I'm Naruto Namikaze. Nodding her head, Mirajan gave the blonde the best smile she could muster. Well, welcome to the guild, I'm Mirajan. It's nice to meet you, Mirajan. I'm sorry we are meeting in some rather sour circumstances. Naruto replied with sincerity. Well, we should all head inside and see the master. Erza cut in, which caused Natsu to get a pep in his step. And then we can go get payback with those phantom jerks. The fire user declared before running into the guild. Meanwhile, Naruto and everyone else just slowly followed Natsu into the damaged guild hall, allowing Naruto to get a quick glimpse of the guild hall before making his way into the basement, where he found a majority of the Fairy Tail wizards gathered together, sulking and drinking their depression away. Natsu was already off to the side yelling at a rather short and elderly man, which from the conversation Naruto could hear was enough for Naruto to learn a few things. One, the short man was their master, and secondly, he had no intention of striking back at their attackers. However, as Naruto eavesdropped on Natsu with his superior hearing, Erza suddenly placed a soft touch onto Naruto's arm, prompting him to look at the scarlet-haired warrior. Come, let's introduce you to the master. Erza began in a tone that did Naruto take notice that something wasn't right. Almost as if the girl beside him was trying to fake confidence despite having an entire mountain of worries suddenly dangling around her. Worries of her friends and family having targets on their backs that could quickly lead to a war. So doing the only thing he could do, Naruto gave Erza the best smile he could make and nodded his head. Yeah, let's go say something before Natsu drives him crazy. Feeling a sense of ease sweeping over her from the blonde's grin and voice, Erza gave a tiny smile before leading Naruto to the master. An action caused the aged wizard to take notice of Naruto and Erza, right before using his enlarged hand to crush Natsu into the floorboards of the basement, effectively knocking the boy unconscious and ending his complaining about Phantom Lord. Erza, it's good to see you. Makarov began with a large red tint on his face as he held up the beer in his hand, showing that the short man was in fact quite drunk. Who's your friend? A boyfriend perhaps? A vein popping on Erza's head at the fact that her master was drunk and not giving a good first impression. The scarlet-haired wizard quickly held a hand to Naruto. This is my new friend Naruto Namikaze. He wishes to join our guild. Hearing this, Makarov lifted his brow and studied Naruto carefully, showing that despite the man's drunken state he still had the capacity to analyze the blonde with expert precision. Is that true? The small wizard began as he directed his attention completely onto Naruto. You want to join my guild? Folding his arms and taking a moment to think over his words, Naruto could tell this man was sizing him up. His tone was serious and his gaze was trying to find the slightest sign of danger. Yet Naruto wasn't intimidated in the slightest, as this man didn't hold a candle to his mother's level of intimidation. So giving Makarov a friendly smile, Naruto nodded. That's right, Erza convinced me that joining the guild could be a lot of fun. Naruto answered honestly. And what type of magic do you use? Makarov asked, which caused Naruto to hold out his wooden sword. I use magical items, Naruto explained, an answer that caused Makarov to nod. Is that so? Makarov asked in a tone that didn't really buy into the answer he was given, since he could feel Naruto had way too much magical power for a typical magical item user. I know it's not the most flashy or powerful magic, but Erza has even promised to help me get better with my swordsmanship. Naruto replied as he rested his sword onto his shoulder. So I'm really excited to work with her as much as I can. Closing his eyes, Makarov had a rather large list of questions about the blonde's true power and intentions. However, the aged wizard was always one to accept someone who needed a home or guidance. So with that in mind, he wasn't going to turn his back onto Naruto and deny him from the guild, but he was going to watch the blonde more closely than anyone else. Well, in that case, welcome to the guild, Naruto. Makarov began as a small magical item that creates guild stamps shimmered to life in his hand. So where would you like your guild mark and what color will it be? Thinking for a second, Naruto eventually opened his kimono to reveal his chest to the man. Can you make the mark black, but give it a crescent yellow design like the moon in the center? Lifting his brow at the rather odd request, Makarov looked at his newest wizard. I could, but for what reason? Rubbing his head nervously, Naruto thought quickly on his feet and decided to use a little bit of honesty with the older man to avoid any further questions. Well, me and my mom always had a strong connection to the moon. So it's just a small way to connect back to my mom. Finding not a single hint of deceit in Naruto's words and actions, Makarov merely nodded and pressed the device against Naruto's right pectoral muscle, leaving the exact guild mark he had requested for anyone to see. There ya go, my boy, you're an official fairy tale wizard now. Erza smiled and watched Naruto look down at his new mark. It looks good on you. Quickly snapping his eyes to Erza, Naruto gave his new friend a toothy grin. Thanks. Well, don't be shy, Naruto, walk around and mingle with your new guildmates. I'm sure Erza can help you get to know everyone. Quickly taking a bow, Erza grabbed onto Naruto's arm with a smile. Of course, I'll make sure everyone gets to know our newest member right away. Feeling himself being pulled away from the master, Naruto was quickly led to a table where Lucy was talking with a few unfamiliar wizards, all of whom had their attention placed onto Naruto immediately. So this is the new guy Lucy was talking about, huh? A male around Natsu's age spoke up with a grin. Name's Jet, by the way. I'm Droy, the other boy quickly introduced. And I'm Levi. A small girl with blue hair added in before all three struck a quick pose. And together we are Team Shadow Gear. Laughing at the three teens, Naruto held his hand up with a friendly smile. Hey, I'm Naruto Namikaze, it's a pleasure to meet you all. Watching Naruto quickly make friends with the members of Team Shadow Gear, Erza was filled with joy at how her newest friend was fitting into their guild. Later that night, seated on a small windowsill and looking out and up into the night sky, Naruto watched the moon and thought over everything that had happened, reflecting over his new status as a fairy tale wizard and the fact that his new guild had been attacked by another major guild. Something that could lead to a massive conflict where Naruto might be forced to fight. Asking himself if he was forced into a corner, would he use his true strength to protect his new guild? An action that could give his location away to his mother, forcing Naruto into a situation where he may lose his freedom once more. Yet if Naruto was being honest with himself, he wouldn't give up his freedom for people he hardly knew. Nevertheless, he for some reason found the answer to his question growing harder and harder to find, as he was slowly starting to develop a bond with his new friends. Erza especially, as his instincts alone drew the blonde to the redhead in a way he couldn't explain. What the hell are you guys doing in my apartment? The voice of Lucy suddenly shrieked, which snapped Naruto out of his daze and made him look at the blonde who had entered the room. Yo, Lucy. Natsu spoke up as he waved at the blonde from her table, which the boy was using to play cards with Happy and Gray. Took you long enough. Happy chimed in. Nice place you got, Lucy. Gray added in, as he was suddenly stripped into his underwear. Why are you all here? Lucy yelled again, which caused Erza to step forward with a calm expression. It's possible that members of Phantom Lord are still within the town. So many members are sticking with their teams to stay safe. Erza explained in a matter-of-fact tone as she smiled. So we all decided, since we have worked as a team in the past, to stay together. Naruto tossed his hands up and laughed. And I'm homeless, so thanks for giving me a roof for the night. Lucy quickly sighed in frustration and dropped her shoulders in defeat, since she knew that accepting the situation was better than arguing about something that wouldn't change. So instead she just walked over to where Natsu was and took a seat. Well, I'd say make yourselves at home, but you already have. His attention away from the outside window, Naruto crossed his arms and looked at his new guildmates. So is this kinda thing normal? Why did Phantom Lord attack our guild in the first place? Erza took a seat on Lucis' bed and closed her eyes. Who knows? Our guilds have had a few small skirmishes in the past, but never a direct attack like this. Natsu huffed. If Gramps wasn't so scared we could go wipe the floor with those bastards. Gramps isn't scared. Gray fired back in a calm voice, while reclining back. He's one of the 10 wizard saints after all. The what? Naruto and Lucy both spoke in unison. It's a title bestowed upon the T.N. greatest wizards in the continent by the chairman of the Magical Council. Erza explained, which caused Lucis' eyes to go wide. Oh wow. So the master must be pretty strong to have that title. Naruto pointed out, which caused Erza to nod. But Phantom Lord's master Jose is also a wizard saint. Happy added in. Who cares? Natsu yelled as he slammed his hand onto the table. All Phantom has is numbers. Gramps is just too scared to do anything. That's not true. Gray began as he was starting to get annoyed. The master is just aware of the consequences a conflict between two guilds that are run by wizard saints would have. He's trying to keep the peace, not start a war. Erza nodded in agreement. Besides, we stand on equal footing with Phantom Lord in terms of power. They're 4 S-class wizards. The Elemental 4 and Iron Dragon Slayer are more than a match for us. Wait, Phantom has a Dragon Slayer like Natsu. Lucy gasped in shock, while Naruto merely absorbed the information. Since another Dragon Slayer explained the smell Naruto picked up on back at the guild. Yes, but let's not talk anymore about these burdensome topics. Instead let's merely relax and forget about Phantom Lord for the night. Erza began as she quickly used her magic to change into her pajamas. That sounds good to me. Naruto replied as he stood up and began to stretch. Erza looked at the blonde. And more importantly the sword in his hand. Then the scarlet-haired knight smiled before walking to an open spot in the apartment. Well, if you're interested I can show you a few sword stances and strikes while we have some free time. Shrugging his shoulders, Naruto joined Erza's side. Sure, show me what ya know. Lucy turned pale. Please don't destroy my apartment. Don't worry Lucy, we won't spar or anything. Just go over some basics. Erza reassured as she summoned a sword in hand and began to demonstrate a basic sword stance. Now Naruto, follow along with me. Mimicking the girl's movements, Naruto listened carefully to every tip and trick of expertise that Erza had to offer. Something that caused the scarlet-haired knight to smile as she enjoyed this moment she was sharing with the blonde. As she had never shared her swordsmanship with anyone else before. You're a natural. Erza complimented with a small smile as she watched her newest guildmate take to her teaching. We just might have to ourselves a little spar. Quote, that could be fun, but I don't think our current location is the best training field. A light-hearted laugh escaping her lips, Erza merely nodded. Yes, I believe you're correct. But what I'm showing you are the basics of a sword style. With training and practice you can build upon these stances and strikes to make a style all your own. A wide toothy grin appeared on Naruto's face at what he was told. Since the young dragon was already getting a mountain's worth of ideas to make his own sword style. One that he just might be able to sneakily add some his moon dragon magic into for even stronger results. Well, in that case I owe you big time. Naruto admitted as he gave Erza an eye smile. Not only have you given me a guild to join, but you're helping me get stronger. I promise I'll make it up to you one day. Erza merely nodded with a smile of her own. I'll hold you to that. The following day, standing by Erza with an expression of disbelief, Naruto looked up at the beaten bodies of Team Shadow Gear, all of whom were pinned onto a large tree in the middle of town. Whoever did this will pay. Erza mumbled in a deathly serious voice, which did make Naruto glance at his new friend, finding her anger oddly similar to that of his mother's. Yet Naruto didn't even have a moment to think of a response, as a powerful magical signature grabbed his attention, making Naruto look to his side to find his new guild master glaring upwards with pure anger. I can stomach the destruction of my guild, but to harm my children. Makarov growled loudly as he snapped his staff and spiked his power even further, is calling for war. Watching silently as the master along with a few other members of the guild went to help Levi, Jet and Droy. Naruto turned his attention to Erza, who seemed to have a razor-sharp focus. So we are attacking Phantom Lord back. Most likely. Erza replied as her eyes suddenly grew a small hint of concern. But you aren't expected to join any attack. Naruto lifted his brow at Erza's words. I'm not afraid of a little fight. I'm stronger than you think. I know, but with Levi, Jet and Droy's condition. Somio. Ne has to stay behind to take care of them, which would most likely be Mirajan and Lucy. However, they would be in danger of another attack. So I worry about their safety. You don't have to stay. But it would be a burden off my shoulders to know they would be safe. I see. Naruto mumbled softly as he rubbed the back of his head. In that case, don't worry about them. I'll keep everyone back here safe. Placing a soft hand on Naruto's arm, Erza nodded with the best smile she could muster. Thank you. Giving Erza a half smile that filled her with a warm feeling deep inside, Naruto merely laughed softly. Don't mention it. Just give them hell for me. Magnolia Magical Clinic. With his back against the wall of the room that Levi, Jet and Droy were placed in for their injuries, Naruto watched with a rather neutral expression as Lucy tended to the wounds of the fellow guildmates. Wondering to himself if he made the right decision to stay behind with Lucy and watch over their comrades. Don't worry. Lucy spoke up, which grabbed Naruto's attention. Everyone will be okay, our guild is strong. We just need to trust in our friends to kick Phantom's ass. Sighing to himself and removing himself from the wall, Naruto stood beside Lucy and looked down at the blonde. I guess you're right, but I'm starting to regret staying behind. Don't be, no one expects you to put yourself on the line for people you just met. Besides, helping me with taking care of these three is more than enough help. All the same, I hope Erza and everyone else is okay. Lucy got a soft smile and looked away from Levi and up at Naruto. You seem to have become rather fond of Erza. Don't tell me our newest member has a crush on the queen. Naruto narrowed his eyes at his fellow blonde, as whenever she as near Natsu he could hear her heartbeat grow faster. Big talk from a person almost as new as me. Who happens to fancy a rather loud-mouthed dragon slayer. Turning beet red and fumbling over her words, Lucy didn't know how to respond to Naruto. Something that made the dragon smirk with a toothy grin before giving her a pat on the shoulder. I didn't embarrass you, did I? Naruto asked with a light-hearted laugh. Don't worry, I won't tell a soul. Wait, don't dodge my question like that. You do have a crush on Erza. Lucy quickly accused as she pointed her finger directly at Naruto. I wouldn't call it a crush. Naruto replied coolly as he looked off to the side and shrugged his shoulders. You probably wouldn't understand it, but her scent is calming to my senses. Her voice is soothing to hear, and she has this aura about her that keeps me intrigued. Lucy looked directly at her fellow blonde with a deadpan expression. So you have a crush? His eyes twitching in annoyance, the half-dragon glared at his new friend. It's not that simple, okay? Giggling and covering her smirk with her hand, Lucy had to admit Naruto was someone who could make a person smile through the bleakest of times. Okay, I'll drop the subject for now, but I'll be rooting for you and Erza. And with how both you and Natsu pester me about something, I'll be rooting for you too. Naruto shot back, making Lucy turn red once more. Okay, fine, let's call a truce. Lucy quickly gasped out, which made Naruto smirk. All right, truce. Naruto replied softly as he was enjoying himself with his little back and forth with Lucy. Wondering if this was what it was like to have a sibling to argue and bond with. Good. Lucy began as she stood to her feet and started to stretch. I'm going to head out and pick up a few things that will help these three. Naruto nodded and grabbed his wooden sword. I'll come with you then. Holding her hands up and smiling, Lucy shook her head. You don't have to, I'll be fine. Resting his weapon on his shoulder, Naruto simply started to walk towards the exit. And leave you alone for another attack? Not a chance. Quickly joining Naruto's side, Lucy lifted her brow. But who will keep Levi and the others safe? Tapping his ears with a rather wide grin, Naruto gave Lucy a confident look. Let's just say I have the ability to hear and smell better than most. If anyone unfamiliar gets near them, I'll know. Being oblivious to the implications of Naruto's heightened senses, Lucy merely gave the blonde a small bow. Well, in that case, I appreciate you tagging along to keep me safe. Just know I'll watch your back as well. Walking out into the streets of Magnolia, Naruto nodded. Sounds good to me, Lucy, just lead the way. Well, there is a cheap stall this way that sells some local ingredients. I was thinking about preparing a nice meal to help Levi and everyone recover faster. Lucy explained as she started to walk with Naruto following close behind. That's rather thoughtful of you. Naruto praised with a beaming smile, which caused Lucy to wave the blonde off. It's the least I can do. Levi has been a really great friend ever since I joined the guild. So I wanna do everything I can for her. Jet and Droy. Feeling a drop of rain against his skin, Naruto immediately felt on edge. Since out of nowhere a downpour of rain began to cascade down onto him and Lucy. Where did this rain come from? Lucy grumbled as she quickly used her hands to try and shield the top of her head from the downpour. Naruto, smelling unfamiliar magic in the air, knew this wasn't a natural rain, but was instead the byproduct of someone's magic. So grabbing his sword and positioning his body to stand in front of Lucy, Naruto kept a calm and calculated demeanor. Lucy, I want you to stay close to me, okay? Surprised by the blonde's sudden request, Lucy stayed close by without any backlash. What's going on? His nose detecting a scent identical to the magic in the air, Naruto SNA. PPED his eyes in the direction of a single woman with blue hair, who was holding an umbrella and walking directly towards Naruto and Lucy. I'm about to find out. Naruto replied in a hushed whisper, as he pointed his wooden sword at the unfamiliar woman. Who are you and why are you making this rain? Juvia is a rain woman. The now named Juvia introduced herself, while Naruto began to catch a second scent close by. And who are you? Quote, maybe I'll tell you when your friend comes out of hiding. Naruto growled back, which caught Lucy off guard, making the girl wonder if they were being attacked like Levi and the others were. Oh, how interesting. A fourth voice spoke up, as a rather strange-looking man started to materialize out of the sidewalk by Juvia's side. You're quite observant to have noticed me so quickly. Saul. Juvia began as she looked at the man. Is this girl our target? The now named Saul got a rather sleazy gleam in his eyes as he looked at Lucy and adjusted his monocle. Blonde. Celestial Gate Keys and a member of Fairy Tail. I do believe this is Lucy Heartfilia. Lucy's eyes going wide in horror at the mention of her full name, didn't know how to respond. Naruto. On the other hand, could hear Lucy's heart beating faster and faster. Something that caused the blonde to grip his sword tightly. Don't worry, Lucy. You're safe as long as you're with me, Naruto declared in a confident tone, while his eyes suddenly got a dangerous glow to them. And I'll only ask you to this once. Why are you targeting my friend? And just who are you? Saul asked as he noticed Naruto's guild mark under his kimono. I've never heard of a fairy tale wizard matching your description. I'm a little new. Naruto began in a low and serious voice, as he watched both enemy wizards carefully. But I'll only ask this once more. Why are you after Lucy? It's simple. Juvia spoke up in a dry voice. Master Jose gave the orders to capture Lucy Heartfilia, so we are doing just that. And as members of the Elemental Four, we always carry out our master's wishes. Saul added in, trying to use his title to intimidate both blondes. Especially with how lucrative it would be to capture the heir of the Heartfilia family for the reward her father is offering. Naruto, these are the guys Erza warned us about. They are bad news. Lucy gasped in a low voice as she was trembling with fear. We need to escape. I'm not impressed. Naruto spoke up in a rather bored voice, which made Lucy's eyes go wide. But if you're here to try and hurt my friend, well then I'll stop you right here and now. A large grin gracing his lips, Saul looked directly at Naruto. I would love to see you try. In an instant Naruto appeared before Saul like a flash of light. Then using all his might, Naruto slammed his wooden sword down onto Saul, causing a bone-chilling cracking sound to ring throughout the area before Naruto slammed Saul straight into the ground below, making the ground crack and break as Saul was pressed deep into the stone walkway. There, Naruto began in a hollow voice as he backed away and looked at the unconscious and twitching Saul, his normally vibrant blue eyes having a her dangerous void expression behind them. I tried. Amazing. Lucy gasped in awe, quickly snapping his sword up and pointing it directly at Juvia to where the tip was pointed at her neck. Naruto SL. Aoi looked at the water wizard with a deathly serious gaze. Take this bastard back to your master and let him know this is what I'll do to every single member of your guild if you don't back down. Dropping her umbrella in fear, as she hallucinated a massive dragon roaring behind Naruto's back, Juvia quickly grabbed Saul and retreated in pure terror. Naruto, watching the woman run away, merely turned Eden looked at Lucy with a calm expression as the rain began to disappear. You okay? Naruto asked softly, while his voice still held a slight hint of rage behind it. Nodding her head quickly, Lucy was almost at a loss for words. Naruto, that was incredible. You beat an S-class wizard in the blink of an eye. It's not that impressive. He was weak and underestimated my strength. Naruto replied as he folded his arms and lifted his brow. Now want to explain why you would be targeted. They called you the heir to the Heartfilia family. Slightly cringing at Naruto's question, Lucy knew there was no point in keeping her family a secret anymore. I'm from a rather wealthy family in Fury, but 1 year ago I ran away from my father and set out to join a guild. He's a bastard that never wanted anything to do with me. But now he's paying for my capture. The guild, Levi, Jet and Droy. All of this is my fault. Making a fist and lightly bonking Lucy on the crown of her forehead, Naruto gave his fellow runaway a smile. This isn't your fault, Lucy, it's your old man and Phantom Lord's fault. Hell, it's been a year since I ran away from my home and mother. So trust me, I understand where you're coming from. Tears building up in the corner of her eyes, Lucy frowned. But your mom isn't causing all these problems for our guild. Trust me, Lucy, if my mother knew where I was, she would cause havoc. Naruto replied before giving Lucy the best smile he could muster. So I promise you that I'll personally make sure Phantom or anyone for that matter will force you back home. I'll keep you safe. Tears running down her cheeks, Lucy quickly bowed her head. Thank you. Laughing at the younger blonde, Naruto ruffled her hair before giving her a final pat on the head and walking off. Come on, let's head back to the guild and Mira. We can tell her what we learned and figure a way out of this mess. Looking up to Naruto and running along his side, Lucy merely nodded with a wide smile. She never had any siblings to look after her, but as she stayed by the older teen, Lucy couldn't help but think if this was what it was like to have a protective older brother. Later at Fairy Tail, standing naked in a scorching hot shower, Naruto merely had his arms pressed against the wall as he was deep in thought. He had kept Lucy safe and escorted her to Miragen to explain the situation to the former S-class wizard. However, not much longer after Naruto and Lucy explained what they learned from Saul and Juvia, the rest of the guild had returned. Yet they were not victorious, but instead beaten and battered, with the master being in the worst shape. Considering in the attack he had his magic completely drained, leaving him in a critical state. An outcome that again made Naruto question himself. As if he would have gone with everyone, he could have made a difference. I could end this little war right now if I wanted. Naruto thought in frustration as he began to think of everyone who had been injured so far. Mom wouldn't find me if I used my magic right away, but eventually word would spread of my abilities and then she would definitely be onto me. Naruto tightened his fists. Single quote. Maybe after all this time she would forgive me for leaving and give me more freedom. Naruto mused in thought, but quickly frowned. No, that's not like Mom at all. However, a realization suddenly struck in Naruto's mind. Realizing he was trying to convince himself to use his magic to help his friends. Realizing he was starting to care for these people more than his own freedom. Realizing he was almost ready to risk it all to help people he hardly knew. Am I really ready to give myself up to save everyone? As Naruto had his inner turmoil, he wasn't paying attention to his surroundings one bit. So he didn't hear the footsteps approaching the shower's door until it slid open, revealing Erza, who was wearing nothing besides a towel around her body and sporting a blush as crimson as her hair. What are you doing here? Erza yelped in shock, as she used both hands to hide her eyes. An unfortunate decision for the young wizard, as the towel around her body quickly fell onto the ground, unveiling her body in all its nude glory to Naruto. Couldn't you hear the water running? I'm taking a shower, you pervert. Naruto yelled back as his face was equally as red as Erza's. However, he wasn't trying to hide his eyesight from the beautiful girl before him. I'm not a pervert. This is the girl's shower. Erza fired back as she used her hands and arms to cover her exposed body. How was I supposed to know? I've hardly been here a day. Naruto shouted back, which caused Erza to recoil back and her eyes to twitch. Okay, you may have a point, the scarlet-haired woman admitted, as she lowered herself to grab her towel. Then by concealing herself she tried to avoid looking at Naruto. And are you not going to cover yourself? Naruto shrugged his shoulders. My childhood home had a rather large Ge hot spring so I was used to people seeing me naked. So you're a pervert like Gray. Okay, for one, you're the pervert. Why are you even still here? And second, taking baths in my own home while my mother's followers were around to serve us was completely different than being a nudist like Gray. Absorbing new information about Naruto, Erza turned her back to the blonde. I'm just merely waiting till I can have my turn. However, you had people serving you. Were you rich like Lucy? Taking a deep sigh and realizing Erza wasn't going anywhere, Naruto turned the water off and went to grab a towel to dry himself off. The family wasn't exactly wealthy, just powerful. What do you mean? It's exactly what it sounds like. My mother is an incredibly powerful person and that power causes people to flock to her. Naruto explained in a rather simple tone. And just how powerful is your mother exactly? Erza asked as she looked at Naruto from over her shoulder, finding herself incredibly curious about the blonde's past. I don't know how to place it into words for you to understand, but if our guild and Phantom Lord joined forces to fight my mother, you would all die. Naruto explained in a deathly serious tone that made Erza jerk her body around to look at the blonde. You're exaggerating, right? Not in the slightest. Naruto replied as he started to dress back into his kimono. But how? Erza asked as she found what the blonde was telling her impossible to believe. Quickly realizing he was saying too much about his mother, Naruto closed his eyes and sighed. Don't worry about her. She's not really important right now. We should keep our attention on our current situation with Phantom Lord. I'm certain we haven't seen the last of them, and with the master injured, who is calling the shots? Erza frowned at this question. We have several active S-class wizards, but I'm the only current S-class present to help. Erza explained as she tightened her fists in frustration. But I'm not fit to guide anyone. I wasn't there to help the master and I don't know what to do without him. However, everyone is counting on me to take charge and lead the guild. Naruto was surprised as he could hear the cracks in the powerful and confident girl's voice. Even the way she was carrying herself was so defeated and lost, which didn't set right with the young dragon. Well, I might be new. Naruto began as he reached out and rested his hand on Erza's shoulder. But I'll do anything I can to help support you. Her nerves slowly dying down, Erza let the smallest smile escape her lips. Thank you. So tell me what I can do to help. Well, a sudden trembling shaking the guild hall, Erza stopped mid-sentence and looked at Naruto with concern. What was that? Naruto mumbled before. Another tremble shook the building and the sound of what sounded like massive footsteps could be heard. More trembling shaking the area, Erza quickly used her magic to change into her regular clothing. I'm not sure, but we need to investigate. Nodding his head and completely dressed, Naruto and Erza quickly ran out onto the front of the guild hall. Finding the rest of their guild all gathered as well, while a large looming castle on legs slowly stomped its way through the water in the distance. A sight that caught Naruto completely off guard, as he had never seen or heard of any type of walking fortress before. Erza on the other hand merely gritted her teeth nervously. I was afraid of this. The scarlet-haired knight began in a low voice, which made Naruto glance down at her. Phantom has brought their full force to us. Taking in this information, Naruto watched as the walking fortress came to a sudden stop a medium distance away from the guild, leaving Naruto and the rest of the Fairy Tail Guild on edge. I will give you this one warning. A voice projected through the fortress. Jose. Erza growled in a low voice. Hand over Lucy Heartfilia or die. Hearing this threat, Naruto looked over to Lucy, finding his new friend was shaking with her head down, obviously horrified that she was the root cause of this guild war. Thinking he was about to say something to stand up for his new friend. Knowing he made a promise to keep her safe and he was going to see it through. Yet before Naruto could say or do anything, a sudden voice yelled out. Not a chance in hell. Natsu roared in anger, as he shook his flaming fist at the fortress. Lucy is one of us. Mikao yelled out. We'd never give her over to you. Kana added in loudly. Elfman flexed his muscles and growled. A real man never turns on his friends. Hearing similar declarations to keep Lucy within the guild and not give her up, Naruto was completely surprised. He knew Lucy was almost as new as he was. Regardless, every single member of the guild was dead set on protecting her despite the threat Phantom Lord brought to their doorstep. It was surreal to see a group of individuals like this and left Naruto amazed at their response. More importantly, it left Naruto wanting to protect and preserve this outstanding group of people and their ideals. We would rather die than give away one of our own. Erza screamed loudly, which sent chills down Naruto's back. Fine, have it your way. You can all die together like the fairy trash you are. Watching a massive cannon barrel extend from the center of the fortress, Naruto could sense a massive buildup of magical energy. He's really trying to kill us, Naruto thought as he watched magic starting to gather at the barrel's edge. Should I use my roar to counter the blast? Fire the Jupiter cannon. Naruto, hesitating on what action to take, was suddenly caught off guard by Erza, who ran forward and used her requip magic to transform into a different armor set. That's adamantine armor, Happy declared in surprise, which earned a few gasps of surprise from the veteran members. Don't tell me she plans to stop that. Gray yelled out in worry. Erza, don't. You could die. Stop, this is insane. Everyone stay back. Erza roared as she ignored everyone's protest and used the large shields on her wrists to form a shield in front of herself, causing a massive green magical circle to form. Naruto's eyes went wide as the Jupiter cannon fired a massive blast of magical power, resulting in the blast impacting the defensive magical circle Erza was using. However, even more surprising was how the shield was holding strong against the attack, with only letting a few cracks slip by. Then as the Jupiter's blast died down, Erza's magic circle and armor shattered, which sent the girl flying backwards. Yet before she could hit the ground, Naruto dashed forward and caught Erza in his arms. You were amazing, Naruto complimented as he was inspired by Erza's selfless act to protect her friends. Smiling weakly and looking up at the blonde, Erza blushed. I'm sure you would have done the same. Thanks for catching me. Noticing Erza was completely exhausted from fending off the attack, Naruto merely held the girl close and looked at the fortress. You're giving me too much credit, but now I see why you're called the Queen of Fairies. So you delayed your demise. Jose roared loudly, which made everyone freeze. It's useless. In exactly 15 minutes I'll fire another shot and finish this once and for all. Damn it. This is not good. We survived one attack thanks to Erza, but we can't stop another. We have to do something. Hearing the cries of worry from his new guild, Naruto slowly walked Erza over to Miragen. Then by handing the girl over, Naruto suddenly turned his body towards the Phantom Lord fortress, a glow in his eyes as his mind was dead set on his next course of action. Naruto, what are you doing? Erza called out. You, and everyone in this guild are something special. Naruto began in a low voice, while he grabbed his sword tightly. I hardly know any of you, but your ideals are something worth risking everything for. What are you going on about? Gray yelled loudly, while a veil of magical power started to radiate from Naruto's body, catching seasoned wizards like Miragen and Erza off guard by the blonde's power. I have no practice using my moon dragon magic like this, Naruto thought to himself as he faced off against the fortress with a steeled resolve. But it will let me fight with some of my true strength without letting everyone know my true power. Gripping his sword and remembering the small lesson Erza had given him over swordsmanship, Naruto knew this wasn't going to be perfect. However, his was the first step towards his new fighting style that he was going to dedicate to protecting his friends. Moon breathing first form, Dark Moon, Evening Palace. Naruto roared as he slashed swiftly in a horizontal crescent motion, creating a singular magical wave of his dragon magic that shot forward at blinding speeds, carving a crescent moon shape horizontally through the building that completely separated the fortress into two separate halves, resulting in the building toppling down on top of itself. Damn, Naruto thought as he looked down at his hands. It was weaker than I thought, but it's a start, I guess. Incredible. Lucy gasped in awe, as she had never seen a wizard so powerful before. That's so cool. Natsu yelled with stars in his eyes. You gotta fight me right now. Just who is this kid? Kana mumbled loudly. Who knew he was so strong? Happy yelled. Erza, being supported by Miragen, was now looking at Naruto with admiration. And you say I'm amazing? The HT began with a small smile as her interest with Naruto was growing more and more. Resting his sword onto his shoulder, Naruto looked back to his new guild with a smile. The fight isn't over yet, so do what you gotta do. I'm going for Jose myself. Hell yeah, Natsu roared in a cheerful voice as he jumped by Naruto's side. In that case leave that bastard Gajeel to me. Walking forward with a cool demeanor. Gray smirked with newfound confidence. Don't go running into danger without me. Naruto nodded as he was okay with letting them deal with the weaker wizards so he could go straight for their master. Well, let's go, Naruto, Erza called out, which made the blonde look at the scarlet-haired beauty. Seeing she had a wide grin and thumbs up. Kick his ass good for me and I'll treat you to some strawberry cake. Laughing and nodding his head, Naruto gave Erza a small wink. You got yourself a deal. Running along a frozen path in the water made by Gray, Naruto was leading the charge. Into the crumbled remains of the Phantom Fortress. Keep on your guard, Naruto instructed as he looked over his shoulder to Gray, who was following close behind. We don't know how many forces Phantom brought with them. Hey, this kinda reminds me of that temple I busted up. Natsu laughed out, as he was flying overhead thanks to his partner Happy. Naruto's brow twitched at the comment, but before he could reply, a large burst of pitch-black shades began to swarm from the fortress, placing the three wizards on guard, but to their surprise the shades simply ignored them and all began to fly for the rest of the guild. What are those? Gray yelled out, as he watched the shades descend and start attacking his comrades. It's someone's magic, Naruto answered as he kept his attention on the fortress. By their sheer number I would say they are controlled by Phantom Lord's Master Jose. However, they seem quite weak, so everyone else should be able to hold them off. Well, in that case let's end this war. Natsu yelled loudly as he pointed at a specific location of the fortress. Full speed that way, Happy. Aye sir, Happy shouted before taking off at his top speed, leaving both Naruto and Gray in the dust. Watching Natsu and Happy go, Naruto wished he could use his wings to fly to where he needed to go. Unfortunately, doing so would open up a lot of questions for anyone that would see him do so. A slight annoyance, but Naruto knew he couldn't go too far with dragon abilities. So instead he merely used his heightened sense of smell to track the locations of his enemies. Finding several familiar and unfamiliar smells from within the fortress. Gray, Natsu has the right idea. Naruto began as he quickly pointed to a section of the fortress where he was picking up the scent of Juvia. Someone Naruto knew Gray could handle. We should split up. I'll head through the front and you go that way. Nodding his head, Gray made himself a separate path and started to run where Naruto told him to go, leaving the half-dragon alone to head straight into the front of the demolished building. Already picking up two unfamiliar scents close by. In fact, one of the people he could smell was standing directly in his path, while the second was trying to conceal themselves. The man in Naruto's eyesight stood confidently with his arms crossed, almost as if he was waiting for someone to come in to challenge him. I don't know who you are, but as a member of the Element 4, I Totomaru will. The mage known as Totomaru began before Naruto used his raw speed to blitz the man, catching him completely off guard as Naruto was right within his personal space. I don't have time to waste on you, Naruto mumbled as used his wooden sword to crack the man in the ribcage, making a loud crunching sound ring throughout the area before Totomaru went flying into a pile of rubble. Already unconscious before his body could slump over onto the ground, relaxing his body from his previous attack, Naruto could hear the second individual's near-silent movements along with the growing smell of his scent. Too bad your fight ends here. It's so sad, a voice yelled from behind Naruto, but the blonde simply spun on his heel and kicked his attacker into the ground. Don't think for a second you got the jump on me, Naruto began in a dry voice as he looked down at his attacker with a hollow glare. Realizing the now unconscious man at his feet matched the description of the man responsible for Makarov's condition. The final member of the Elemental Four, Arya. Walking away from Arya with a calm and confident expression, Naruto slowly began to make his way in the direction that he knew Jose was waiting for him. Let's see just how strong a wizard saint really is, Naruto mumbled softly as he walked into the near-demolished fortress with no fear whatsoever. With Gray jumping from one pile of rubble to another, Gray was quickly scaling higher and higher onto the fortress, reaching eight to where he could look down and realize a simple fall could be quite deadly. So using his ice magic he made a few quick supports to ensure the area he was walking on wouldn't collapse under him. Yet as he finished his task, Gray felt a sudden downpour against his skin. Rain. The Maker Wizard mumbled in confusion. Where did this come from? Juvia is a rain woman, so the rain follows Juvia. The voice of Phantom's resident water wizard spoke up as she materialized right before Gray. Quickly striking his Maker magic stance, Gray prepared himself for anything. Well, I don't care what you are. I won't let Phantom Lord get away with hurting my guild. Holding her hand out, Juvia instantly caught Gray within a massive water orb that was suspended in the air. Water lock. The blue-haired woman mumbled softly as she twirled her umbrella. And like that, the fight is over. Gritting his teeth and freezing the water, Gray used his raw strength to shatter the ice and free himself. Stunning. Juvia as she watched the half-naked boy who was surrounded by tiny shimmering ice crystals with a large blush. If that's how you wanna play. Gray yelled before summoning a massive hammer over his head. Ice make. Hammer. Swiping her hand upward, Juvia quickly used a sharp arc of water to slice through Gray's ice. Water slicer. The water woman yelled before firing off more attacks straight at Gray. Ice make. Shield. Gray called out as he slammed his hands onto the ground and summoned a massive ice shield construct to protect himself. Yet as Juvia's attack slammed into Gray's ice, the shield began to crack and the unstable ground they were standing on began to shake, making both wizards slightly sway to keep their balance. Damn, this place is dangerous. Gray mumbled as he ran away. Ram his shield and dropped into his Maker stance. Ice make. Lance. Water slicer. Juvia yelled back as her water slammed into Gray's ice, which cancelled out each other's spells. However, a few ice lances and streams of Juvia's water impacted against the building, further adding to its current unstable condition. Ice make. Gray began but stopped the moment the ground beneath him collapsed, forcing Gray to act quickly and freeze the area and him to give him a quick and sturdy foothold. However, across from his location, Juvia wasn't as lucky to have magic to stop the ground beneath her from collapsing. So having little room to stand, Juvia stumbled to the edge and realized there was nothing she could do except fall and accept her fate. A fate like any other drop of water from the sky, which was to fall against the ground with a splat. This is Juvia's end, the rain woman thought as she fell off the building. Gray, watching the girl close her eyes, ran forward without thinking. Ingen reached out with one hand to grab Juvia while using his other hand to latch onto the building's edge, using every ounce of his strength to hold onto Juvia the best he could. Why, you saved me! Juvia gasped in surprise, while Gray gritted his teeth. We might be enemies, but that doesn't mean you deserve to die. Gray yelled back as he pulled Juvia up against his chest. Just hold onto my neck so I can climb back up. Wrapping herself around Gray with hearts in her eyes at her savior, Juvia felt a tightness within her heart she had never felt before. Meanwhile, the rain overhead stopped. The sun began to shine down onto the pair. With Natsu. Gajiel. Natsu roared with rage as he flew into a broken window with Happy, coming into a small room where his fellow dragon slayer was waiting. Well, if it isn't the salamander. Gajiel laughed loudly, as he punched his hands together. I was hoping you would. Why do I smell a dragon? Fire leaked from his mouth as he pointed at Gajiel with an annoyed expression. That's just that jerk Naruto. He smells funny like that, but don't worry about him. Your fight is with me. TCH, whatever. I'll kick his ass after I'm done with you. Gajiel taunted, which sent Natsu over the edge in anger. Like hell you will. Natsu roared loudly as he ran forward and clashed fists with Gajiel, starting the fight between the Fire and Iron Dragon Slayers. With Selene floating high above the ground, Selene glared at the massive monument carved into the mountain before her. A small sting of pain within her chest as she saw the massive stone likeness of the only human she had ever loved. It would seem things have changed in the last 19 years. Selene mumbled softly as her eyes drifted away from Minato's face and looked at the two heads that followed after her dead husband. If I'm not mistaken, those faces are little Tsunade and Kakashi. Never would have guessed one of Minato's brats would have followed his footsteps. Looking around the village of Konoha, Selene even had to admit the layout of buildings seemed completely different than she remembered. Almost as if the village itself had been demolished and rebuilt from scratch. Yet as Selene observed her surroundings, a faint smile of amusement graced her lips, as she noticed a few Konoha shinobi gathering around her on the building rooftops. Who are you? A Konoha shinobi with pitch-black pineapple-shaped hair yelled out, while a blonde female and slightly overweight boy flanked his sides. Oh my. Celine laughed out with a condescending sneer as she placed a hand to her cheek. By your looks and smell I assume you're the next generation of the Inoshika Cho. I wonder if your parents ever spoke of me. Instead of replying, the teen clicked his teeth, trying his hardest to figure out the woman's identity. However, even with his superior intellect he couldn't place a finger on who this woman was. Something that put him on edge, as she knew who he and his comrades were so easily. Yo Shikamaru. What's going on? Do you Ino and Choji need some backup? Another shinobi yelled out as a new group of 3 jumped by the now named Ino, Choji and Shikamaru. We don't know yet Kiba, but be careful. Shikamaru replied as he kept his eyes on Celine. We don't know what she wants. And now we have an Inuzuka, Aburame and Hyuga. Celine giggled out to the group's surprise. As she was easily able to identify the new group just by looks and smell like the group before. What's next, in Uchiha? Celine. A voice yelled out loudly, which surprised the P of Konoha shinobi by the arrival of their Hokage, who landed protectively in front of the group of young shinobi. Celine on the other hand merely grinned as she looked down at the man dressed in the all too familiar Hokage robes. Well, if it isn't little Kakashi all grown up and a Hokage no less. Showing visible signs of fear that was incredibly rare for the seasoned warrior. Kakashi swallowed the lump within his throat and looked at the woman he always remembered seeing with his master. I haven't seen you in nearly 2 decades. What brings you back to the village? I've been searching for something I've lost. Celine began in a vague tone as she floated to be eye level with Kakashi, but kept her distance. I started my search 1 year ago within Elantir and then moved to Edalis. When I didn't find what I was looking for. After another failed search I went to this dimension and again didn't find what I was looking for. Leaving me to conclude that Earthland would be where I would find what I lost. And just what have you lost? Kakashi asked with an air of caution, knowing full well the danger of the dragon before him. Mai and Minato's child, Naruto Namikaze. Celine explained with a rather bitter voice. As she was still furious over her only son running away from home. Sensei's son. Kakashi gasped in a soft almost unheard voice, but Celine heard the man easily with her hearing. Yes. The little youngling ran away from home without my permission. Celine explained as she crossed her arms over her chest. Honestly, I would have never imagined he would be hiding in my home dimension. But my Naruto has always been unpredictable. If you know that your son isn't here, why are you within the village? Kakashi asked. With a vile gleam in her eyes, Celine placed a finger on her cheek and giggled in a rather condescending tone. Now why are you so afraid of me, little Kakashi? Let me guess, you're thinking I'll do something along the lines of destroying this village for fun. Or maybe even revenge for what happened to Minato. Please, the little brat Hiruzen thought the same thing, but I have no interest in damaging something Minato sacrificed himself for. Well, I like the late third Hokage know of your destructive capabilities and anger. That's fair, I did leave a tiny mess in Edalis when I couldn't find my son. Though little Hiruzen finally found his grave. I swear you humans are the most fragile creatures. The young shinobi who didn't know anything about Celine were confused at how she referred to their former elderly leader as little and called humans like she was something different. Yet Kakashi knew better that the woman before him was a very dangerous dragon who was a few hundred years old. He was killed by Orochimaru a few years ago. Kakashi explained in a dry voice. Yes, that's very sad, but let's get to the reason I'm here. Celine began in a tone that showed no sympathy or respect for the third Hokage's fate. You see, I can't exactly go searching for my son in Earthland for a few reasons. First off, there are a number of dragons who are just as powerful as me. So if I go wandering around, I'll attract their unwanted attention long before I find my son. Thinking about it now, that's probably another reason Naruto decided to hide within Earthland. In fact, if I know my son, and trust me I do, he's probably hiding within Acnologia's domain of Ishgar. Knowing I would never step within those lands again because of that bastard. So you need someone to find your son for you. Kakashi mumbled softly, which made Celine grin. Very good, Kakashi. I knew you were always the brightest of Minato's brat students. The dragon complimented as she got a rather dangerous gleam within her eyes. I'm wanting your best trackers and warriors to track down my son and bring him back to me. And if we refuse, Kakashi asked. A lifeless expression appearing on her face, Selene glared at Kakashi with eyes filled with nothing except wrath. Followed by the bright sun overhead suddenly vanishing to reveal a hauntingly dark night sky with nothing except a bright full moon cascading over Selene's figure. I'd leave another tiny mess like I did in Edelus. Selene threatened in a hollow voice, as her magic began to leak from her body. Then I'll form a team immediately. Kakashi replied as he knew his options were either to help the woman or fight her. You'll just have to help my shinobi reach Earthland to find your son. Selene smirked. That won't be an issue, but I'll give you a few days to find your best shinobi. I'm not an unreasonable woman after all. But I'll be in the local hot spring to refresh myself while I wait. The moon dragon explained before she vanished right before everyone's eyes with impressive speed. Allowing the sun and light to return to the village overhead. Sighing to himself, Kakashi turned around to find 6 young shinobi all looking at him for answers. In fact, Ino was the first person to voice the group's questions. Kakashi-sensei, just who was that? Your generation doesn't know of her, but she's an incredibly powerful and dangerous woman. Who is the wife of my sensei, our 4th Hokage Minato Namikaze? So she's a friend of the village? Choji asked, which made Kakashi close his eyes. She was never loyal to Konoha, only Minato-sensei. When he died sealing Kurama with the Reaper death seal. Selene took her newborn son and left the village behind for good. Or until today. Shikamaru folded his arms and lifted his brow. I've never seen you act like this before. Just how dangerous is Selene? Far too dangerous to have as an enemy. Kakashi explained in a dry voice as he started to walk away. I want you all to gather in my office for a full briefing. I'm going to go find Team 7. With Naruto. Walking through what was once a large open area of the fortress, Naruto looked around and saw piles of rubble cutting off many of the doorways. Leaving nowhere in the large area to go except for straight ahead. Yet right in front of Naruto was a large set of stairs that once led up to a higher floor. However, these stairs now stopped at a large gaping hole in the fortress. A large hole that a single individual was standing at with a rather sour look directed right at Naruto. I take it you're Jose. Naruto called out as he held his sword out with confidence. That's Master Jose to you, worm. Jose snarled as he started to descend down the stairs. A dark aura of magical energy already engulfing his body as he grew closer and closer to Naruto. Actually you're the guy who is about to be unconscious at my feet. Naruto quipped back with a light laugh. Holding his finger out and concentrating his magic for an attack, Jose didn't even dignify Naruto with a response. Instead he started to fire blasts of pitch-black magic from his fingertip right at Naruto. Making the young half-dragon react by jumping side to side while using his wooden sword to ward away any of the magic projectiles that he couldn't outright dodge with his speed. Then coming to a sudden stop, Naruto gathered his magic before swinging his sword in a crescent motion towards Jose. Moon breathing first form, dark moon, evening palace. Naruto screamed with confidence as he sent his new attack straight for Jose. However, the seasoned guild master didn't hold the title of Wizza. Road Saint for nothing and effortlessly held the palm of his hand forward. Already conjuring a massive swirling vortex of dark purple magical energy. Dead wave. Jose yelled loudly as he sent a massive purple beam to collide with Naruto's attack, resulting in the two attacks canceling each other out in a massive explosion. Yet as dust and debris filled the area, Jose quickly displayed his battle experience by firing more blasts of his magic to catch Naruto off guard thanks to the lack of proper vision. Shit. Naruto cursed as he was forced onto the defensive by Jose's tactic and quickly to run away from the man's onslaught of attacks. What's the matter, you fairy trash? Jose taunted as he tracked Naruto's movements and followed the blonde with a continuation of attacks. You're not all high and mighty now. Growling in frustration, Naruto did a quick aerial cartwheel and slashed his sword forward. Moon breathing first form, dark moon, evening palace. Rolling his eyes, Jose entered the spell once more with his magic. Is that all you've got? A single mediocre attack. Landing onto his feet in a crouched position, Naruto narrowed his eyes. Now realizing a man of Jose's caliber is much different than any wizard he has fought so far. So his current style of improv techniques with his true magic mixed in might not get the job done. However, Naruto was very resourceful and still had plenty of ideas to test out. I'm only getting started, Naruto replied as he tightly gripped his sword. Useless arrogance, Jose retorted with his hand held outward as he concentrated a vortex of dark purple magic into his hand. Dark pulse. Dashing forward at the giant explosion of purple magic flying towards him, Naruto flipped into the air and swung his sword downward in a series of crescent-shaped strikes before yelling out. Moon-breathing second form, pearl flower moongazing. Using the dozens of small slashes of moon magic that discharged from his sword to propel himself forward while at the same time countering Jose's spell, resulting in Naruto soaring high above Jose's current location. You're wide open, Naruto roared loudly as he slashed his sword in two powerful crescent-shaped motions. Moon-breathing third form, loathsome moon, chains. Jose gritted his teeth at the two massive curved-shaped magical projectiles, forcing the man to hold both his hands into the air. Dead wave. A massive explosion rocking the area, Naruto was thrown back from the force of the blast, forcing the half-dragon to brace himself before making a hard landing onto the ground below. You're an interesting wizard to be able to keep up with me, Jose began as he watched Naruto stand to his feet without any real damage taken. To think that bastard Makarov had someone of your caliber within his pathetic guild. Well, I'm a little new to the guild, Naruto replied. Then why not join a real guild? Help me finish off the rest of Fairy Tail and I'll give you a spot in Phantom Lord. His eyes glowing a deep shade of blue, Naruto gave the man a toothy smirk as Erza's words echoed within his mind. I'd rather die. Lifting a hand to his eyes and shaking his head in disappointment, Jose quickly moved his hand and revealed his now black eyes to Naruto, allowing the blonde to smell the rather putrid magic that was radiating from Jose. Then die. Jose screamed as he dashed straight for Naruto, taking the blonde by surprise at his sudden shift to close quarters fighting, as Jose was within his personal space in the blink of an eye. Naruto, trying to react, started to lift his sword to defend himself. But his technique was still unrefined. So instead of blocking Jose's advance, Naruto was unable to stop the man from holding his hand right at Naruto's stomach. Dead wave. Jose yelled before blasting Naruto point blank with his dark purple magic, sending the blonde soaring through several walls with the force of the blow, eventually coming to a stop by crashing into a new room where he had landed right in the middle of both Gajeel and Natsu. Shit, that actually stung a bit, Naruto mumbled softly as he slowly got back onto his feet, realizing rather quickly that he had crashed right in the middle of Natsu's fight and all eyes were on him. Hey Naruto, what are you doing here? Natsu yelled in annoyance as he got the full attention of the half-dragon, trying to take Jose down. Well, looks like that's going well. Natsu fired back, obviously annoyed by Naruto placing a pause on his fight with Gajeel by his sudden arrival, his brow twitching at the comment. Naruto noticed Natsu had taken much more damage than his opponent. Well, looks like you're getting your ass handed to you. Gajeel laughed loudly while Natsu growled in anger. It's not fair. I don't have any fire to eat and this guy has been eating every piece of metal in sight. Naruto rolled his eyes at the Dragon Slayer's excuse, but Natsu mentioning fire did give Naruto an idea to try. Well, I can supply some fire, but I don't think you can handle it, so I think I'll just share my fire with Gajeel and Jose. Glaring at the teen who smelled exactly like a dragon, Gajeel morphed one of his arms into an iron buzzsaw. You're talking big game for a piece of fairy trash. Turning to lock eyes with Gajeel, Naruto held his sword tightly before igniting the blade in a white inferno of bright white fire. Moon-breathing fourth form, Naruto mumbled as he swung his sword in a full circular motion and screamed at the top of his lungs. Blooming moonlit flame. Gajeel, taken by surprise, lifted his arms to protect himself. But he couldn't do much, since the massive twister of fire that resembled a full moon engulfed his body and forced the prideful wizard to yell in pain. Considering the sheer heat of Naruto's fire was much more intense than what Natsu had been using. What is this power? Gajeel thought to himself with panic as Naruto appeared within the flames with his sword held behind his back. Just who is this guy? Moon-breathing first form, Dark Moon, Evening Palace. Naruto yelled loudly as he slashed his sword right into Gajeel's stomach, sending the wizard flying back. unconscious and snuffling out his white flames with the backlash of his swing. Natsu, watching Gajeel be defeated, merely looked at Naruto with awe, wondering if his new friend was stronger than people like Erza or Laxus. Yet he didn't think of questions like that for long, as he realized what Naruto had done. "Wait a minute, you totally just hijacked my fight." Natsu growled in anger, as Happy ran to his side. "Natsu, at least we beat him." Naruto nodded and rested his sword onto his shoulder and looked at the hole he was sent through. Finding Jose was slowly stepping his way into the room. "But there is still him. I'm glad you didn't forget about me," Jose replied before his hands began to glow a dark purple. "Happy, take Natsu back to the guild," Naruto ordered in a stern voice as he glared down at Jose. "Like hell I want to. You're only in the way," Naruto yelled loudly as he cut Natsu off and swung his sword forward. Moon breathing first form, Dark Moon, Evening Palace. Smirking at Naruto's attack, Jose merely held his hands up. Dead Wave. An explosion rocked the fortress as the attacks collided with one another, which caused Natsu's eyes to go wide at the power Naruto and Jose were throwing around so casually. "Listen Natsu, don't take this the wrong way, but I can't fight this bastard and worry about my friends at the same time," Naruto explained as he didn't take his eyes off of Jose for a second. "Fine," Natsu mumbled in a low and disheartened voice as Happy latched onto his back. "Just win this fight for Gramps and everyone, okay?" His eyes glowing with a dangerous gleam. Naruto merely nodded without hesitation. "I plan on it." Jose pointed the palm of his hand at Natsu and Happy before giving a vile smirk. "Don't think you can just leave." Naruto dashing forward closed the distance between himself and Jose in a fraction of a second, slashing at the man with a quick strike that forced him to jump backwards to avoid the attack. "And don't you think for a second," Naruto began in a low and powerful voice as he positioned his sword high above his shoulder, already getting himself ready for another attack, "that I would stand by and let you hurt my friend. You're an arrogant brat," Jose replied with a sneer as he watched Natsu and Happy fly off. "But I'll be more than glad to break you along with the rest of your guild. I'd like to see you try," Naruto challenged. Chuckling in a low voice, Jose merely held both his hands outward. Dead Wave. Jumping forward and into the air, Naruto quickly swung his sword in a flurry of downward strikes. Moon breathing second form, Pearl Flower Moongazing. Naruto yelled before slicing through Jose's attack and twisting his torso before slashing his sword in two fast arcs. Moon breathing third form, Loathsome Moon, Chains. Dark Pulse. Jose roared loudly as he used his magic to once again cancel Naruto's attacks, resulting in yet another large explosion that covered the room in smoke and dust, making the guild leader smirk at the outcome of their spells colliding. "I can keep this up all day, but I wonder how much longer you can Jose began to taunt, but was surprised by the tip of Naruto's sword shooting out of the smoke and jabbing into his stomach. Then the wooden blade continued to grow and shove Jose back into the wall behind. "I wouldn't get ahead of yourself," Naruto yelled back as he used his raw strength to drag Jose up the wall and along the ceiling, forcing the man into a position where he was right above Naruto. Then as he retracted his sword to its original size, Naruto watched Jose fall forward with a calculated gaze and covered his sword with white flames before jumping into the air and yelling. Moon breathing fourth form, Blooming Moonlit Flame. Jose, having no time to react, was quickly blasted with a pillar of white-hot flames, scorching the wizard as even a man of his caliber felt overwhelmed by the sheer heat of the flames Naruto was using. Yet the young half-dragon was far from done with his assault. Moon breathing third form, Loathsome Moon, Chains. Naruto screamed with all his might before slashing his sword in two crescent-shaped swings, hitting Jose with not one, but two magical projectiles in the center of his chest, forming a large axe that quickly expelled blood from the man's torso. Floating high above the ground and watching Jose recoil backwards, Naruto grinned at his work. How was that for fairy trash? Suddenly snapping his head at Naruto with a pitch-black glare of pure hatred, Jose merely held his hands outward and summoned a swirl of the most vile-smelling black magic Naruto had ever smelled. Dark Extinction. Jose mumbled in a low monotone voice as he unleashed a dark black beam of magic straight onto Naruto, who had no way to escape thanks to his current position in the air. This could be bad. Naruto began in a low voice as even he had to admit the magic he was feeling was quite powerful and could deal serious damage. Yet as the attack was mere inches from connecting with his body, Naruto simply sighed and blurred out of sight in an unimaginable burst of speed. In fact, Naruto moved so fast Jose didn't even see the young half-dragon move. From Jose's point of view, all he saw was his spell rocket downward before piercing the ground below and shooting straight through the floor below, making a large hole that went completely through the fortress and pleasing Jose with the results. To think Makarov had someone so strong within his guild. Jose spat in disgust as he tried to find any signs of Naruto, but smirked as he couldn't see anything. A true waste of potential, but that's Makarov's fault for bringing you into a weak guild. A hand suddenly pressing itself lightly against Jose's back. The eyes of the wizard saint went wide in disbelief. You know, I wanted to avoid doing this, but you truly are a monster. The voice of Naruto began from behind Jose, as his body and current appearance were hidden from the man. Something that was good for Naruto, as he was currently flying above Jose with two large white wings, while his slitted blue eyes merely watched the man with a carefree expression. Glad Jose couldn't see any of his dragononic features like the small patches of white scale patterns on his skin or the large horn protruding from the side of his head. It was stupid of me. To think I could beat someone of your caliber with a fighting style I made within a day. I'll have to train harder in the future. What are you? Moonlight Palm. Naruto cut in with an ionless voice as he expelled a white beam of moonlight from his hand that sent Jose soaring into the ground below, knocking the man unconscious and leaving Naruto floating above with his sword held by his side. I'm just another member of Fairy Tail, the half-dragon declared before floating down to the ground below and transforming back into his human form. Then by rubbing his neck and stretching his aching muscles, Naruto took a seat on the ground several feet away from Jose, taking a moment to look at his wooden sword with a rather displeased expression. I need to get better with my new fighting style. I can't keep reverting to my dragon abilities in a pinch. Swinging his sword forward and stopping midair to observe the wooden blade, Naruto inspected the magical tool carefully. Maybe getting a real blade made for slicing or amplifying magic would be helpful. Pondering over the idea, Naruto even thought asking Erza for advice would help, considering the girl to his knowledge had a rather large arsenal of magical weapons and armors. They were this way. The loud voice that Naruto recognized as Natsu reached his ears, making the victorious blonde look over to the demolished remnants of what was an entrance. Finding not only Natsu running into the room, but also Happy, Erza, Elfman and Mirajan. Yo! Naruto greeted with a large smile as he waved at the awestruck fairy tale wizards. Is that Phantom's master? Happy gasped. Yup. Wait, you defeated Jose by yourself. Mirajan began in disbelief as she looked at the beaten and bloody man. He's a wizard saint, and I can see why. Naruto laughed in response. He was a tough bastard to take down. What a man, Elfman mumbled in a rather impressed voice, while Natsu quickly jumped forward. Okay Naruto, let's fight here and now. Natsu yelled loudly as he started to bounce on his heels. You owe me a fight after all. Erza sighed and smacked Natsu hard against the back of his head. You will do no such thing, Yuto just got done fighting someone just as strong as the master. Give him time to recover before annoying him with your little challenges. Laughing loudly at how Natsu was scolded by Erza, Naruto Ely gave the beautiful scarlet-haired knight a large grin. You're one to talk about recovering. You should be back at the guild resting after saving everyone earlier. Walking slowly to Naruto, Erza simply extended a hand out to the blonde. I'm fine. In fact, I was rushing here to help you, but you didn't need any of us. Accepting Erza's hand, Naruto was pulled to his feet and into the personal pace of the young redhead that had caught his eye. All the same, I appreciate you worrying about me. Blushing by the boy's words and his closeness, Erza looked to the side so Naruto couldn't see her flustered face. Well, since you beat Jose, I guess I owe you that piece of strawberry cake. Laughing with a tone that sent chills down Erza's back, Naruto merely nodded. It's a date then. Steam flying out of her ears. Erza looked at the rather attractive blue-eyed boy in shock. AAD date. The normally confident girl stammered nervously, which made Mirajan giggle. Natsu tilted his head as he watched the girl he spent years terrified of. Erza's acting kinda funny. Hearing Natsu, Murajan gave the boy a pat on the shoulder and continued her giggling. Finding her former rival's behavior amusing. You'll understand one day, Natsu. Quote, when you become a real man. Elfman added. Happy chimed in. Ignoring the side conversation, Naruto nudged his head to the exit of the room. We should head back to everyone else. Erza nodded in response, but suddenly felt her legs buckle and her body drop. However, before she could fall, Naruto quickly caught her within his arms and laughed. Only a DDING to the girl's blush as she was being supported in Naruto's arms. Well, it looks like you're in worse shape than you thought. Naruto pointed out as he brought Erza up and into his arms bridal style. What are you doing? Erza replied in an embarrassed voice that made Naruto snicker. Well, I can't have you collapsing on me, so I'll just carry you back to the guild. Naruto explained. No, it's fine, I can walk, Erza protested. But Naruto wasn't hearing any of it. Murajan, walking forward, waved her fingers at Erza with an innocent smile. Well, if Erza doesn't want to be carried by our guild's hero, I'll volunteer. Immediately snapping her eyes at her former rival, Erza glared at Murajan with a rather territorial glare. Even going as far to slightly inch herself closer to Naruto almost on instinct alone. Now what's going on here? An all too familiar voice called out, which surprised everyone including Naruto. Master! The collective fairy tale wizards yelled out, as they watched their aged leader approach their location. Overjoyed to see his appearance and health looked just like it did before the failed raid on Phantom Lord. I'm sorry for being late. Makarov began as his eyes looked over the defeated bodies of Jose and Gajil. Taking note that both were very much alive, but had taken quite the thrashing. However, it would seem I wasn't needed in the end. Happy. Flew upwards in joy at seeing the master awaken. Okay. Yup. Erza saved everyone from the Jupiter cannon and Naruto beat Gajil and Jose by himself. Hey, I roughed Gajil up before Naruto came in and ruined my fight. Natsu added in through a fit of rage. If anything, Gajil was too tired from the beating I gave him to keep going. Whatever you say, Natsu. Happy mumbled in response, while Makarov merely walked over to Naruto. Is this true, my boy? You defeated Jose by yourself. Still having Erza within his arms, Naruto simply nodded at the master's question. Yeah, I did. He didn't go down easy. But in the end I was able to beat him. Hearing what Naruto had done and watching how protectively he was holding Erza, Makarov had to admit he still had many questions about Naruto's strength. But he fully trusted the blonde as a member of his family. Realizing in only a short time that Naruto was a trustworthy and kind person. You have my gratitude, Naruto. I couldn't be more happy to have you in my guild. Makarov began from the bottom of his heart, which made Naruto smile. But I fear now that the war is over, the Magic Council will get involved. A major headache for me and most likely you as well, Naruto. Why? The half-dragon asked. You defeated a wizard saint. Makarov explained as he pointed at Jose's unconscious body. That's a big deal and I'm sure the council will want an audience with you. Well, I'll do whatever you think is best. Naruto replied without hesitation, which made both Erza and Makarov smile wide. I wouldn't worry too much about them, I won't let those old farts on the council boss around or do anything to my children. Naruto nodded. Well, in that case let's head back to the guild. Naruto proposed as he slightly held Erza up. Someone needs her rest before our date. It's not a date. Erza groaned in an embarrassed voice as she used her hands to hide her blush. We are just eating cake. Erza's no fun. Murajan giggled as she jokingly winked at Naruto. I'll go on a date with you anytime. And I wanna fight you right now, Naruto. Natsu added in loudly, which caused Erza to give both her friends a death glare. Both of you stop it already. Erza ordered in a stern voice that made Naruto snicker. Don't be so hard on them, Erza. Naruto began in a carefree tone that slightly calmed the girl's building rage. Unfortunately, her rage was about to return from Naruto's rather foxy and mischievous grin. At least they don't perv on me while I'm in the shower. Oh my, Erza, you naughty girl. Murajan giggled in a teasing voice. Did you like what you saw? A vein popping on her head, Erza began to pound her fist against Naruto's chest as he laughed in response. For the last time, it was an accident. Don't go telling people I'm a pervert. Fine, I'll keep our little shower meetings a secret. Naruto replied with a snicker and wink, which made Erza freeze with a large blush. Yet after a small second she began to hit the blonde once again. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Erza roared loudly. Natsu, watching how Naruto only continued to laugh at Erza, leaned down to Happy and brought a hand to his partner's ear. You know, maybe I don't wanna fight Naruto. Anyone who isn't afraid of Erza is someone I don't wanna mess with. That's a real man for you. Elfman added, watching his wizards all interact with one another. Makarov couldn't help himself from laughing to himself. Glad he was the one responsible for overseeing this generation of fairy tale wizards. Hoping to himself that he would even be able to do so for many more years to come. Walking by the master's side with a relaxed posture, Naruto kept silently glancing around his surroundings with slight confusion. This was because Naruto was within the town of Era that housed the magical council, but the building they were within didn't have much protection. Something Naruto found odd, as he would have guessed such an important building would have a good amount of defenses. Even the temple Naruto grew up within had more followers guarding him and his mother than the Magic Council had. What do you think of the Magic Council so far? Makarov suddenly chimed in, which made Naruto glance down to the short man. Well, I'm surprised how unguarded the whole building is. Sure, there are a few guards, but for the most part security seems pretty lax for such an important building. Naruto replied in a matter-of-fact tone as he lifted his brow. Is that because the council is just that powerful? Laughing and shaking his head, Makarov stopped in his tracks and looked up at Naruto. Not at all, most members of the council are actually quite weak and their power comes from their influence. Sure, there are a few powerful members, but for the most part their power is within the laws they uphold. I see, so the lack of proper security isn't from their power, but their arrogance. Naruto mumbled as he folded his arms. Well, there has never been a serious attack on the Magic Council. So there has never been a need to have an outlandish force to protect the council. Makarov explained before letting a small chuckle escape his lips. Unless you're planning on making an attack, I have no need to do so. Naruto began in a simple voice as he shrugged his shoulders. I just know my mother is an incredibly powerful individual and still has a large number of security in our home. Relying on the idea of no one would ever do something or you're strong enough to fight back will always end in your downfall. Recognizing your limits and preparing for the worst are some of the first lessons my mother taught me. She sounds like a wise woman. Makarov praised, which made Naruto roll his eyes. She can be, of course that's only when she isn't being a controlling tyrant. Naruto grumbled as he blew some air between his lips in frustration. Absorbing the information about Naruto's mother, Makarov lifted his eyebrow. You know, I would like to know more about you, Naruto. Where you came from, what you desire, and just what type of magic you truly use. The wizard saint began, which made Naruto narrow his eyes at the man. Since if we are to stand before the council, we better be on the same page. I guess that's a good point. Naruto mumbled with a low sigh as he figured he could share a few things with the master, while keeping more of his serious secrets to himself. For the most part my story is somewhat similar to Lucis. I was an only child to a very powerful woman and my father died when I was young. So ever since I could remember, my mother kept me locked away and refused to give me any type of freedom. I guess she was afraid I would end up sharing a similar fate to my dad. So like Lucy, you ran away. Makarov cut in as he already began to figure out some of Naruto's story. It took nearly a dozen attempts and over a decade, but yes, I ran away from home. Naruto admitted before closing his eyes and taking a deep breath. Quote, it's been nearly a year now and I've done everything I can to stay off my mom's radar. What do you mean by that? Opening his eyes and looking down at Makarov with a razor-sharp focus, Naruto simply leaned against the wall behind him. You already realize my magic is something a little more than magical items. Giving Naruto a soft laugh, the seasoned wizard quickly nodded. I knew from the moment we first met, my boy. You leak magical power unlike any normal wizard I've ever met, especially one claiming to use magical items. Naruto gave the man a small chuckle of his own before rubbing the back of his head. I guess defeating a man as powerful as Jose didn't help with my cover story either. Not in the slightest, Makarov replied before lifting his brow. But you have this old man curious. What is your real magic and why hide it? Taking a long-winded sigh, Naruto folded his arms over his chest and poked out 2 fingers. There have only been 2 users of my magic in the history of the world. The first was my mother and the second was me, but don't be offended if I don't share with you what my magic is. Keeping that secret close to my chest is one way I'm trying to stay off my mom's radar. Makarov merely nodded as he respected Naruto's privacy. Then I won't ask about your magic unless you wish to tell me in the future. However, I have to ask about your mother. Would she become an issue like Luce's father was? Someone who essentially created some form of magic must be very strong. That's a question I don't have a proper answer to if I'm being completely honest. Naru, to began in a rather hollow voice as he started to zone out. My mother is controlling and very powerful. She's far stronger than I am and without question the strongest magic user I've ever met. So if she ever found me, I don't know what lengths she would go to bring me back home to the temple. How would you say her power compares to mine? Makarov asked calmly, which made Naruto snap his eyes to the man. I'm sorry, but you don't even come close, master. My mother is referred to as a god where we are from and it's a title that isn't for show. In all seriousness, if she ever found me, I'd hold it against you if you just handed me over. Absolutely not. You're a child of my guild, god or not. If someone tries to force anything against your will, fairy tale will fight back with full force. Makarov declared to a stunned Naruto. We will never abandon one of our own. A faint smile gracing Naruto's lips, the young half-dragon was reminded once more that he made the right choice to join the guild. Well, hopefully that day will never come, but in the meantime I've been making a new fighting style to help mask my real magic. It's a spin on my current magic with sword techniques that Erza has shown me. I call it moon breathing. It's not as powerful compared to my real magic, but is strong enough to give an excuse for how I beat Jose. Which is important as the council will most likely want a detailed report of how you did defeat one of the 10 strongest people in the country. Naruto nodded before standing up straight. Well, in that case let's go meet the council. Merely nodding his head, Makarov escorted Naruto further into the building before the duo made their way into a massive chamber, where the entire Magic Council was waiting to judge both Makarov and Naruto over the recent guild war that they had taken part in. Naruto himself noticed a few members of the council were trying to intimidate him with their glares and power. Something that made Naruto almost snort in response, as not a single person here even compared to his mother, who was the only person that Naruto had any sort of fear of. Makarov. The voice of the council's chairman Grand Doma began in a rather low tone. Once again we find ourselves with a major conflict that your guild is in the center of. This has become a rather frequent occurrence lately. I'm not surprised. Michello chimed in with venom behind his voice. This generation of fairy tale is completely out of control. Now I think you're being too harsh. Yujima spoke up with a calm aura around him. Sure, fairy tale has some destructive tendencies, but this recent conflict falls completely onto Jose and the rest of Phantom Lord. That is true, which is why Jose is stripped of his title of Wizard Saint and Phantom Lord will be forcefully disbanded. Grand Doma began, which both surprised Makarov and placed him on edge, fearing what type of repercussions were going to fall upon his guild. A fair punishment that old be shared with Makarov and his troublesome guild. Michello yelled loudly, which made Naruto glare at the man. You may feel that way, but Makarov and his guild only acted in retaliation to Jose's numerous attacks. Ultir spoke up in a soft and calm voice. They can't be held to the same standards as Jose and Phantom Lord. Precisely. Grand Doma added in, which is why Fairy Tail and Makarov won't receive any punishment for their acts in this illegal guild war. His eyes going wide in shock, Makarov merely bowed his head. I thank you for your decision. However, there is still another major point of interest. The voice of Seagrain began as his eyes focused directly onto Naruto. That of course being your little unknown wizard who managed to defeat Jose. Hearing this, Naruto folded his arms since he knew a talk involving his fight with Jose would come up. Yet as he locked eyes with Seagrain he couldn't help himself from thinking he didn't like the man before him. Well, what do you want to know? Naruto fired back without hesitation or fear, which made Michello snort. How about for starters you explain just how some unknown and arrogant wizard managed to defeat one of the 10 strongest people on this continent? Quote. Snapping his eyes to Michello, Naruto definitely didn't care for this man either. It's not that hard to figure out. Jose attacked our guild, so I fought him and beat him because I'm stronger. Yes, that's quite obvious. Grand Doma chimed in as he closed his eyes. Still, what my colleague is really asking is, where are you from and just what is your magic? Our council has records on every legal wizard, but you're a complete unknown. Taking a sigh and closing his eyes, Naruto planned his next words carefully. My name is Naruto Namikaze and my magic is called moon breathing. I doubt you have any records of me since I joined Fairy Tail during the incident with Phantom Lord. And just why did an unknown wizard like yourself join Fairy Tail in the first place? Grand Doma asked, which made Naruto frown since he was growing tired of the man's meaningless questions. I was invited by Erza Scarlet to join the guild. Naruto explained in a matter-of-fact tone. Oh, so you're friendly with the Titania, huh? Seagrain asked with a condescending sneer, which made Naruto quickly snap his eyes to the man. And what if I am? The half-dragon quipped back, which made the blue-haired man laugh. Oh, no reason in particular, I just have an interesting relationship with her, that's all. Seagrain replied in a tone that managed to get under Naruto's skin. In fact, she's given me that same nasty look a time or two. His hand gliding over the hilt of his sword, Naruto's eyes began to glow with a dangerous cerulean gleam. If I find out you've ever hurt Erza, you'll do what? Seagrain shot back with a cocky grin, which made Naruto clamp his hand onto his sword. An action that made Makarov slowly sweat at what action his newest wizard would take next. Wanna find out? Naruto asked as his magic slowly started to leak into his weapon. TCH, all this anger for little Erza. Not worth the hassle if you ask me. Seagrain shot back, making Naruto slow. Tighten his muscles and get ready for an attack. That's it, asshole, That's enough talk about Erza Scarlet. If you wish to continue, do so on your own time. Grand Doma yelled loudly, which caused Naruto to drop his power and click his teeth before looking away in annoyance. We are here to offer the freshly vacant title of Wizard Saint to the man who defeated Jose in combat. Huh? Naruto replied with a sneer, while Makarov's jaw dropped. Really? The master shouted before looking up at the blonde by his side. Naruto, this is an incredibly high honor. Grand Doma nodded. That it is, so tell me, Naruto Namikaze. Will you accept the title offered to you? Thinking over his options, Naruto knew spreading his name with such a title would become counterproductive to his goal of hiding from his mother. Yet he had already done the majority of the damage by fighting and beating Jose in the first place. A feat that without question was already echoing his name and power through the kingdom. So sighing to himself and shrugging his shoulders, Naruto nodded his head. Yeah, sure, I'll accept. Grand Doma nodded and closed his eyes. Then Naruto Namikaze, the moon fairy of Fairy Tail. I welcome you into the Wizard Saint's Hokage's office. Seated behind his desk with a heavy posture, Kakashi merely gazed forward with a rather hardened expression. Finding himself in the Kampa NY of Team 10, who consisted of Hinata Hyuga, Shino Aburame and Kiba Inuzuka. Team 8 with the members of Shikamaru Nara, Choji Akamichi and Ino Yamanaka. Then finally Rock Lee, Tenten and Neji Hyuga as the 3 members of Team Guy. All of whom were waiting patiently for their leader to address them. I appreciate each of you showing up on time. Kakashi began softly before a tired sigh escaped his lips. Now we are just waiting for my former students. Smirking at the Hokage's quip directed at the members of Team 7, Kiba pointed a finger at the copycat ninja. Can't blame those jerks for being late. They learned that from you after all. A bead of sweat dropping from the side of his head, Kakashi merely nodded with his eyes closed. I guess that I should be held somewhat responsible for their actions. At least they didn't take after their other mentors that much. Tenten spoke up as she tried to lighten the mood. Having a second generation of Tsunade, Jiraiya and Orochimaru running around would be much more of a headache. Quote, I think they each take a little from their Sannin mentors, but I'm more surprised Sai is late as well. Ino chimed in as she brought a finger to her chin. He normally doesn't get sucked into their team shenanigans. Well, they were all quite busy and I pulled them back on short notice. Kakashi explained in a rather matter-of-fact tone. So I'm sure they will be arriving at any time now. Lord Hokage, what is this urgent mission that requires all of us? Neji suddenly asked in a calm voice, which earned everyone's attention. We haven't been gathered together like this since the Fourth War. I know Team 8 and Team 10 know some information, but I don't like being in the dark like this. It's rather complicated, and if I'm being honest, even Team 8 and Team 10 don't know all the information. Kakashi explained softly before using his hand to massage a kink out of his neck. Even more so, there is information I'm completely in the dark about as well. Shikamaru, keeping his composure, merely folded his arms and looked at Kakashi. What is that supposed to mean? Taking a long-winded breath, Kakashi reached into his desk and retrieved a small worn photograph. Then handing the picture to his subordinates, Kakashi allowed everyone to see the photo that he had kept hidden for so many years. The client of the mission is a woman by the name of Selene. The seasoned shinobi began as he pointed to the beautiful and pregnant woman depicted in the photo, who was standing by a smiling Minato Namikaze and a much younger Kakashi. Yosh, that's you and the fourth Hokage. Lee shouted in awe, which made Kakashi nod. It's no secret that Minato was my Jonin sensei, but what wasn't well known was his wife Selene. Kakashi explained as he allowed Young to get a good look at the picture before continuing on. She was a woman from another dimension with powers that were unlike anything I had seen at the time. In fact, I don't believe I had seen Po. W or close to Selene until the final battle with Kagaya Otsutsuki. Hinata gasped at her leader's claim. But from what I heard, she was stronger than Madara and almost defeated you and the rest of Team 7 during the war. Kakashi nodded. Which is one reason I want to cooperate with her. She's a dangerous enemy to have. Neji narrowed his eyes. And what exactly does she want? Kakashi opened his mouth to speak, but froze the moment a light-hearted chuckle pierced the air, making those who recognized who was making the noise freeze with the hair on their necks standing straight up. Now it's not polite to speak about someone behind their back. The voice of Selene began, as everyone turned to find the woman casually sitting on a couch within the office. A cup of sake within her grasp as she showed no interest to anyone within the room. Though you shinobi were always the secretive type. Who are you? Lee shouted as he, Neji and Tenten all took defensive stances at their intruder. Oh, Selene began with an amused voice, as she watched all of Team Guy glare at her. Are you that dense? Little Kakashi just told you who I am. I'm Selene Namikaze and most importantly your current client. She's right, stand down. Kakashi ordered sternly, which made everyone relax and Selene laugh before taking a drink from her sake. But little Kakashi was getting to the good part about his story. Selene explained as she crossed her legs and smiled. I'm currently tracking down my son Naruto Namikaze. He foolishly ran away from home and needs to be brought back home and punished. Which is why you're all gathered together. Kakashi spoke up softly. You're being tasked to track Selene's son and bring him back to her. I take it you want him back unharmed? Tenten asked as she looked at the powerful dragon. After all, that would explain why you have all of us gathered to capture one person. Oh no, you have me all wrong. By all means go after my son with the intention to kill Selene. He replied as she waved the rather surprised shinobi off with a casual laugh. I've trained my little Naruto far too much for him to be killed by some common humans. If you want to succeed, you'll have to use everything you have and then some. I take it you have some idea of where your son is? Shikamaru asked as he tried to focus on the logistics side of their mission. Yes and no, Selene replied, casually as she materialized a bottle of sake from thin air before refilling her cup. Naruto is most likely in my home dimension and hiding somewhere within the country I was born in. He's a crafty little youngling and knows I would never step a single foot within those lands searching for him. Is the land you're from that dangerous? Neji asked with slight interest, as if Selene was as powerful. All as Kakashi said, any place she wouldn't go could be extremely deadly. Only if you're a dragon like myself, since that little bastard Aknowledge is obsessed with hunting and killing my kind. However, for humans like yourself it would be quite trivial to go searching for my son. Who probably counted on using the fact he is only half dragon to blend in with the humans to hide from both me and Aknowledge. Wait, you're a dragon? Kiba, Choji and Lee all shouted together while others just looked at the woman with disbelief. Something that made Selene snort in annoyance at the reactions she was getting. Is that really hard to believe? You humans summon animals the size of a house and fight beasts made of chakra that can't destroy mountains. Celine fired back with little emotion as she sipped on her sake. It's really not that far of a stretch that I am a dragon who can take a human form. No, not really. Shikamaru mumbled softly as he and Kakashi were the only two not that surprised by the woman's claim to be a dragon. But tell us, your son Naruto, what does he look like and how strong is he exactly? Creating a magical projection of her son for everyone to see, Celine couldn't help herself from smirking at the blushing girls looking at her child. This is my son Naruto, he's a user of moon dragon magic like myself, but still hasn't reached my level yet. He also has chakra A. ND knows of his secondary source of power. However, he's never tried to train or harness the abilities he inherited from Minato. Still, I must give one grave warning about my son. Kakashi lifted his brow. And what would that be? Celine closed her eyes and chuckled. Be very cautious what abilities you use near my son. He has a knack for copying abilities with just a simple observation or taking what he's seen and mixing it into his own magic if he can't outright copy what he's seen. It's a gift that unfortunately allowed my son to learn more from me and even my followers that I actually wanted to teach him. Troublesome. Shikamaru mumbled softly, as this mission was getting more and more difficult as he learned more about their target. Suddenly the door to the office was opened to Rev. Al, four individuals that made Kakashi sigh in relief. It seems everyone is finally here. Celine, looking at the final shinobi tasked with capturing her son, smiled with a twisted grin. Now isn't this interesting? The dragon began with a small hint of amusement as she locked eyes with a single person with crimson hair. You look exactly like your mother. With Erza, sitting silently at a makeshift picnic table. Erza watched several members of the guild work diligently on completely remodeling the guild hall. Considering, after all the damages caused from the scuffle with Phantom Lord, it was unanimously decided to just rebuild the guild bigger and better than do repairs on the building. Yet Erza herself had taken a small break from helping with the remodeling and just sat off to the side in a daze. This was due to the girl worrying over what was happening with Naruto and the Magic Council. Finding herself unable to focus on anything while the future of her new favorite blonde was up in the air. However, as Erza sat alone, a sudden giggle grabbed her attention and a plate of strawberry cake was laid out beside her. Making Erza glance away from the cake and up to the figure of Murajan, who was clutching a serving tray close to her chest and smiling innocently. Now why are you acting all depressed? Murajan asked softly as she backed away slightly. Don't tell me you're missing your little boyfriend. A dark blush filling her face, Erza looked away from her former rival. Naruto isn't my boyfriend. Oh, I never said I was talking about Naruto. Murajan snickered with a wide grin before giving Erza a wink. But I'm glad to know he's free for the taking. Snapping her eyes at the white-haired pin-up girl, Erza's glare alone was enough to get her message across. That's not amusing. Waving her friend off, Murajan merely laughed softly. Don't be so uptight, Erza, I don't have any intention of getting between you two. Naruto isn't my type anyhow, you know I like bad boys. Making a small pout and grabbing the cake by her side, Erza quickly began to eat her favorite snack. I don't understand where you're getting the idea that I have a thing for Naruto. Rolling her eyes at Erza's stubbornness, Murajan blew some air between her lips. Oh please Erza, we have known each other for years. I can tell you look at and treat our newest member differently than you do everyone else. Honestly, I find your little crush cute. It's not a crush, Erza shot back in a stern voice, which made Murajan lift her brow. Really? Then care to explain why you treat Naruto so errantly from the other boys like Natsu and Gray? Her eyes twitching, Erza slowly used a fork to poke the cake in her hands. You wouldn't understand it, but his scent is calming to my senses. His voice is soothing to hear and he just has an aura about him that keeps me drawn in. Blinking at Erza's words, Murajan let a loud giggle escape her lips. So basically you have a crush. It's not that simple, okay? Erza yelled in anger, which only made Murajan laugh louder. Well, lucky for you, Naruto's back and he's walking over to make things much simpler. Murajan replied as she pointed off to the side. He actually looks very eager to see you. Closing her eyes and lifting a piece of cake to her mouth, Erza kept a calm and graceful demeanor. Please Mira, you think I would fall for such an easy trick? I'm not Natsu. You'll have to try much harder than that. Erza declared before placing the piece of cake into her mouth. Hey Erza, I'm back. Naruto announced loudly as he was standing directly beside the crimson-haired knight, catching her completely off guard and making Erza spit the cake from her mouth out in a gush of spit and cake bits. I tried to warn you. Mirajan giggled innocently as she watched Erza's embarrassment grow along with her red cheeks. Hey, are you okay? Naruto quickly asked before placing a hand on Erza's back and bending down to the girl's eye level. You're not choking, are you? I'm fine, Erza replied as she repressed her embarrassment and sent a fake glare at Naruto. And don't go sneaking up on me like that. Sorry, that's my bad. Naruto began as he rubbed the back of his head. I got a little too excited about seeing you after getting back. Watching Erza's face glow red to the point where she was practically overheating, Mirajan simply laughed and waved goodbye. I would love to stay and watch this some more, but I have things to do. Later, Mira. Naruto replied with a large grin as he moved his eyes back to Erza. Noticing the girl had finally started to recompose herself. And again, sorry about that, Erza. It's fine. How was your visit to the council with the master? Erza asked softly, which made Naruto produce a single medallion. Well, they cleared us of all charges and made me a wizard saint for beating Jose. Naruto revealed to a stunned Erza, who couldn't hide the look of disbelief on her face. Naruto, that's incredible. It's not that big of a deal. Naruto shot back as he casually sat the medallion down, showing how little the half-dragon cared for the title. So far I've met 3 people who held this title. Besides myself, and the master is the only one I hold any respect for. Erza, having her interest slightly piqued, lifted her brow at what Naruto had said. Obviously Jose is one of those 3, but who is the last person? Grunting in annoyance, Naruto folded his arms. Some asshole I met back at the council named Seagrain. The moon dragon replied as he could hear Erza's heart rate grow faster instantly. He mentioned knowing you and managed to piss me off in the process. What did he say? Erza asked softly, as her head was down while her normal prideful and strong demeanor was completely sapped from her body. He only mentioned knowing you and hinted at you two not having a very positive relationship with one another. Oh, I see. Erza trailed off as she suddenly felt a jolt through her body the moment Naruto placed a hand on her arm, making the scarlet-haired knight look at the blonde by her side and finding his glowing blue eyes looking at her with a protective gaze. Has he ever hurt you? Naruto asked in a hollow voice as his eyes got a rather dangerous look of wrath behind them. If so, I'll go pay him another visit and take care of him myself. Her eyes going wide in surprise, Erza merely held her hands up. No, it's fine. I may not like Seagrain as a person, but he's never done anything harmful to me. Plus he's on the Magic Council, so even if he did do something, you would get in trouble for going after him. Like I care. Naruto mumbled back without even thinking about his words. If anyone ever hurts you, I'll show them my claws without question. Claws? Erza repeated with a confused voice, which made Naruto slightly curse and cough into his hand. It's just a figure of speech, I mean use my fists or a sword. I don't have actual claws, that would be silly. No person has actual claws. Well, unless they have a magic that gives them claws, which I don't have. 'Cause I have completely normal human magic. Not saying there is any difference from human magic and other creatures' magic. Laughing at Naruto and slightly leaning into him, Erza lightly tapped the babbling and nervous boy over the chest. I understand what you're saying. You don't have to get so worked up. Taking a deep sigh to compose himself, Naruto merely nodded back at Erza with a smile. Sorry, I don't know what got over me there. It's fine, Erza replied softly as found the hidden quirky side of Naruto rather cute and amusing. But I appreciate what you said. It makes me feel better knowing I have you looking out for me. Don't mention it. You're practically the first friend I've ever made. So I gotta keep you safe and happy. Well, in that case I'll do the same for you, Erza declared in a bold voice, which sent both young wizards into an air of silence. However, the duo was quickly interrupted by one Lucy Heartfilia, who came running up to the pair with a heavy breath. Lucy, Naruto mumbled in a confused voice as he watched the girl bend over to steady her breathing. Are you okay? Snapping up with a golden key in one hand, Lucy seemed rather excited. Guys, Loki was a celestial spirit and I have his key now. What? Erza gasped while Naruto tilted his head. Who? And since he can't use these anymore, Lucy continued without taking a breath as she pulled up a handful of tickets. We get to take a vacation. Really? Erza replied in an excited voice. A what? Naruto mumbled. We are gonna leave tomorrow for Akane Beach. I gotta go tell Natsu, Gray and Happy. Lucy quickly explained before running off, leaving Naruto and Erza alone once again. What just happened? Naruto yelled loudly, as he suddenly felt Erza grip tightly on his arm. Come, let's go tell the master we are leaving tomorrow and start packing for our trip. Erza ordered as she started to drag Naruto off. I don't even have things to pack. Naruto cried out as Erza suddenly stopped dragging him off. Oh, that's right. I'll have to take you shopping then to get a few things. Akane Beach. Sweat dripping down his face, Naruto kept a powerful grip on his wooden sword as he went through several different forms and techniques. His feet twisting and kicking up the sand beneath his feet as he practiced his swordsmanship. Then as Naruto thrusted his sword outward with a powerful strike, he froze and took a moment to catch his breath. Finding the hot sun pounding down against his skin as he wore nothing besides a pair of red swimming trunks that Erza had bought for him since he didn't have any proper beach attire or money. That felt a little better. Naruto mumbled his own progress as he dropped his sword to his side and used his hand to wipe his forehead. Ignorant to the sea of women that were watching him with hearts in their eyes. Now to throw my magic into the mix. Grinning wide and gripping his sword, Naruto was about to kick back into his training. However, the sound of someone roughly clearing their throat caught his attention and made him look over his shoulder. Finding Erza standing a few feet away in a red bikini that matched the trunks he was wearing. However, as the girl had her arms crossed and an annoyed look on her face, Naruto couldn't help himself from chuckling nervously. What do you think you're doing? Erza asked in a stern voice, which made Naruto hold his sword out. Training. Placing her hands on her hips and slightly bending over, Erza gave Naruto a hard stare. We are on vacation. You can train when we go back to the guild. Why does being on vacation mean I can't train? Because you're supposed to have fun on vacation. But training is fun. Rolling her eyes, Erza was about to snap back until she remembered something. Naruto had been locked away with his mother his entire life, making the girl realize that Naruto might not even know what to do on a vacation. Naruto, have you ever been on a vacation? Well, not really. I see, in that case give me your sword. Erza demanded in a tone that left no room for argument. Handing over his wooden weapon, Naruto watched in surprise as Erza instantly sent the weapon into the pocket space where she kept all her weapons. Hey, my sword. You'll get it back after our vacation is over. Until then we are going to participate in fun activities like building sandcastles and playing beach volleyball. Slumping over in defeat, Naruto nodded at Erza's orders. Fine, but I have a question for you. Feel free to ask what's on your mind. Just don't ask if you can train later today or something like that. Walking by Erza's side, Naruto held his hands up and tried to use his words with caution. Okay, but this question is about my swordsmanship, so don't get upset since I'm still talking about swords. Sighing and closing her eyes, Erza started to walk at a brisk pace and just nodded. What would you like to ask about swords? Well, I realized in my fight with Jose I need a better weapon. Maybe a real sword that could amplify my magic or something. That could help me against stronger opponents. I see, in that case I'll try and help you find something when we return to the guild. Smiling with a beaming wide smile, Naruto slung his arm over Erza's shoulder. Thanks, Erza. You're the best. Blushing with her head down, Erza tried to keep her composure. Don't mention it, but let's go find the others. Maybe we could bury Natsu in the sand. Owing loudly and tossing his head back, Naruto got a rather mischievous look in his eyes. Now that sounds more fun than training. A small giggle escaping her lips, Erza merely nodded in agreement. Yet her amusement suddenly dropped the moment she spotted Lucy in the distance surrounded by two strange men. What's going on over there? Erza mumbled in a dangerously low voice. Naruto, looking forward and narrowing his eyes, saw Lucy nervously hold her hands up at the two strange men. Are they harassing Lucy? The half-dragon asked in a rather hollow tone, as he and Erza both started stalking their way closer to their friend. Not if I can help it, Erza declared as her eyes turned into nothing more than glowing red orbs. Yet Erza wasn't the only one with growing eyes, as Naruto's were bright blue color and fixated on the men around the girl he saw as a younger sister. Lucy, unaware of her fellow guildmates, simply pointed off to the side with an awkward expression. I think if you two had that. The girl tried to explain, but stopped in shock the moment Naruto and Erza both appeared by her side and kicked the men she was speaking to into the ground. What do you think you're doing to our friend? Erza yelled loudly, while Naruto's body got a faint outline of his moon dragon magic. You idiots picked the wrong girl to mess with. Naruto added in as he started to crack his knuckles. Now you gotta deal with us. Naruto. Erza. Lucy shrieked in a loud and embarrassed voice. Why would you do that? They were just asking where the umbrella rental stand was. The duo, looking at Lucy before blinking, merely switched their gaze to each other. Oh. Naruto and Erza mumbled softly as they turned and looked at the two twitching men laying in the sand. Our bad. Tacky. In a deep sigh and pressing her hand against her face, Lucy merely shook her head. How in Earthland did people who share a brain cell like you two find each other? Hearing no response, Lucy removed her hand to find both Naruto and Erza running off. A sight that made the celestial spirit wizard drop her jaw. Are you kidding me? Lucy yelled in disbelief before taking a bow at the two unconscious men beside her. I'm so sorry for my friends. And you two get back here. With Erza sleeping within the hotel room she shared with Lucy, Erza was quietly recovering from the busy day at the beach she had shared with her friends. Yet the scarlet-haired beauty wasn't having peaceful dreams as she was busy tossing and turning in her sleep. Memories of her haunting past causing her to reflect back onto the time in her life she wished never happened. Yet as Erza tossed in her own nightmares, and loud knocking at her door suddenly woke the girl, making Erza instantly shoot up with a shortened breath. Hey Erza, are you ready? Everyone else is waiting for us. The voice of Naruto called out from outside of the room. Her senses returning to her, Erza took a deep sigh and looked at the door. Just one moment. The crimson-haired knight yelled back as she stepped out of her bed and quickly used her magic to switch into an elegant red dress. Then by walking towards the door, Erza quickly opened the door to find a smirking Naruto who was dressed in his regular kimono. You look rather beautiful. Naruto complimented as he offered out his arm. Blushing at the comment and hooking her arm around Naruto's own, Erza was quickly escorted down the hall by her fellow wizard. And you look rather handsome as well despite wearing what you always have on. Laughing at the jab at his wardrobe, Naruto used his free hand to wave Erza off. Don't mess with what works if you ask me. Besides, this is about the only shred of clothing I own. It seems besides finding you a new weapon you also need to update your wardrobe even more. Just getting a few pairs of swimming trunks won't help for day-to-day activities. Don't forget I also need a house when we get back to the guild too. And just how do you plan on buying all these things? Erza asked with a laugh. Well, I can either keep burrowing off you or strike it big in the casino tonight. Naruto declared boldly, which made Erza nod. Well, by all means please win big for the both of us. I'll have you know my luck is somewhat legendary back at the temple I was raised in. Naruto declared boldly, while Erza merely lifted her brow with interest. Well, we will just have to place that luck to the test, but I'm curious. You've told me a few things about your mother. Like that she is a powerful wizard and she wouldn't let you leave your home until you ended up running away. Still, I want to know more about your early life. Is that so? I could say the exact same thing for you, Erza. Naruto replied as he looked forward with a blank stare. But I'll tell you what. For every small thing you share with me, I'll answer any question you have with reason. Erza herself nodded and looked off in a daze, as her past was only something very few people like the master knew of. However, she was starting to really trust and like the blonde by her side. Thinking just maybe he could be someone that she could open up to about her past. Well, I was originally from a small village called Rosemary. Erza revealed as she kept her starting information rather simple and not too revealing. Where are you from? Taking a sigh, Naruto much like Erza trusted and enjoyed the company of his fellow wizard. So he didn't mind telling Erza about some of his secrets, but at the same time Naruto wanted to keep things simple and basic just like Erza was doing. I didn't grow up in a traditional village or town. According to my mom, I was born in my old man's village called Konoha. However, shortly after he died protecting the lives of the people of the village, my mother took me to a place called Black Moon Mountain. It was a remote location where one of her personal temples was located. That was essentially my home for 18 years before I ran off on my own. You talk a lot about your mother. I never knew either of my parents. I don't even know their names. Erza admitted, which made Naruto scratch his head at this revelation. Then how did you get the last name Scarlet? Quote. A small ping of pain hitting her chest, Erza forced herself to fake a smile. That's a rather long story. Let me guess the ending. Naruto spoke up with a quick smile. It involves the beautiful scarlet hair you have. A blush filling her face followed by a light-hearted laugh, Erza nodded. To oversimplify things, yes. The duo approaching their way closer and closer to the main gambling hall. Naruto couldn't help himself from grinning wide at Erza. Well, it's a fitting name. I agree, but speaking of names, mind telling me the names of your parents? Erza asked softly, which made Naruto stop for a second and Erza to take a stop as well. Quickly worrying that she had overstepped her boundaries with the blonde by her side. That's only if you wish to share that with me. I don't want. Quote. It's fine Erza. Naruto cut in with a small laugh, as he found her behavior rather cute. I don't mind telling you their names, it's just I haven't talked about either of them by name in so long it caught me off guard. My old man's name was Minato Namikaze and in my mother's stories was described as a great man. I'd love to hear those stories sometime then. Erza replied softly, which made Naruto nod with a smile. Of course I only have a handful of stories. Naruto admitted before he and Erza began to walk once more. Mom didn't like to talk about Dad much and normally only did so when she was feeling sentimental or drunk. And what was your mother's name? Erza asked as she and Naruto entered the main gambling hall, where dozens of different games and people were scattered everywhere. Celine. Naruto answered back without even thinking, which made Erza reflect back. Swearing to herself she had heard that name before. However, she didn't have long to think as the voice of Lucy suddenly caught her attention. Naruto. Erza. The blonde wizard shouted out, as she waved the duo down from her seat at a blackjack table. I saved you two some seats. Come play. Naruto waving back quickly led Erza over to Lucy, finding himself a seat by his fellow blonde with Erza by his side. Looks like we made it right in time for a dealer change. Hey, where are the others? Oh, they are somewhere around here. Lucy answered with a loud laugh. I'm sure you'll hear Natsu running around in a few minutes. Let's just hope he can behave himself. Erza chimed in, which made Lucy roll her eyes. Or attack anyone like you two did. Naruto rubbed the back of his head and laughed. We already told you it was a big misunderstanding. Exactly, we were just looking out for you Lucy. Erza added, which made the blonde smile. I know and I appreciate the thought. Lucy replied as a new dealer joined their table and started to shuffle the cards in his hands. I always feel at ease knowing you two are watching out for me. It seems you're rather popular Erza. The dealer spoke up, which made Naruto snap his eyes at their dealer. Watching as he quickly tossed 5 cards in front of Erza, which perfectly spelled out the word death. But you always were likable big sis. Who are you? Erza quickly asked, but froze the moment the entire room went pitch black. Followed by screams and the sound of a gunshot filling the room. What's going on? Lucy screamed in shock. Naruto himself kept a calm and cool demeanor, using his superior eyesight to watch the man before him in the darkness. Making sure to keep Lucy and Erza safe in the rather abrupt confusion. Watching the man before him using some type of magic on the random civilians around their location. But not targeting him or the girls by his side. Making Naruto think something more complicated was going on. Yet just as fast as the lights went off they came back on to reveal an empty gambling hall. Meanwhile the mysterious dealer was casually dropping cards to his side. Cards that had magically trapped every other person within the area inside. What exactly is going on? Naruto mumbled in a low voice. As he watched the man carefully. His nose already smelling a few more scents coming closer to his location. Show. Erza suddenly spoke up, which made the man laugh. So you do remember me big sis. The now named Sho shouted in a hysterical craze. Since when can you use magic? Erza yelled back, as Naruto was now very interested in what was going on. However, Lucy was the one to voice their concern. Erza, who is this guy? And why does he call you big sis? Yeah, why don't you tell them Erza? A new voice shouted happily, as Naruto and Lucy both found strange orange bindings suddenly constricting around their body. Bindings that were so tight that they made Lucy collapse onto her side, but Naruto just simply stood still completely unfazed. Miliana. Erza yelled in disbelief as she looked at the cat-like girl. You can use magic as well. You'd be surprised how easy learning magic is. A new voice spoke up, as another man made themselves known to the group. Wally. The one and only. The now named Wally replied before a fourth person phased into view from the shadows. It's been a while, Erza. Simon, when did you all learn magic? Naruto, continuing to watch, in silence, knew these were the only 4 people that were ambushing them. Yet he didn't know why they were doing so, just that these strange people were connected to Erza in some way. You'd be surprised what can happen in a couple years. Big sis. Sho chuckled as the 4 attackers all grouped together to stand across Erza. The latter of whom was at a complete loss of words. Erza, who are these guys? Lucy gasped loudly as she was trying to fight against the bindings. We all grew up together. Erza explained softly, as her body was numb. We aren't related by blood, but I knew them before I joined the guild. And now it's time for you to come home, big sis. Sho declared, making Erza's heart sink, which was a reaction Naruto saw clear as day. From where I'm standing, it doesn't look like she wants to go anywhere with you. Naruto spoke up as he stood his ground and didn't budge from the bindings that were trying even harder to strangle him. So how about you think twice before upsetting Erza in front of me? Wally merely laughed and morphed his arm into a gun. A weapon he pointed at Naruto with casual confidence. Look, moron, we already killed your little friends and you look a little tied up. So I would stay out of things that don't concern you before you and that blonde bitch end up dying next. Shaking his head with a small laugh, Naruto could feel his anger coming out. In his demeanor take a shift that resembled that of his mother. For one, I can hear Gray and Natsu's hearts beating just fine. Secondly, Naruto began before he snapped out of his bindings and appeared right in front of Wally before anyone could blink. Then by using his hand to firmly grasp Wally's neck, Naruto effortlessly lifted the man into the air and started to strangle the man. Don't talk back to me with such arrogance when threatening my friends, you insect. Wally. Sho shouted as he watched his friend slowly lose the life in his eyes. Stop this before I break that blonde girl in half. Miliana threatened in a desperate voice, which made Naruto extend his free hand out and open his palm. Try it. Naruto mumbled as he glanced at the girl with his blue eyes that shifted into his dragonic pair. Striking instant fear within the cat-like girl at the intimating irises glaring at her. I'd kill you before you could move. Naruto. Erza suddenly yelled loudly, which made the blonde pause for a second. Please don't hurt them. Hearing the request, Naruto didn't know anything that was going on. Yet he respected Erza's wishes and choices. So he quickly dropped Wally onto the ground and lowered his hand. Vanishing in another burst of speed to appear by Lucy's side and free the girl before anyone could even process his speed. Fine, but I want to know what's going on here. Yuto mumbled as he helped Lucy back onto her feet. So someone better start talking. Because like my mother, I don't have a lot of patience. Erza, looking at the friends from her past and then at her new comrades, merely hung her head. It's a rather long and depressing tale. Naruto, walking over to Erza, softly picked the girl's chin up and looked into her eyes with a caring look that completely countered his earlier wrath. Don't forget, I promised to keep you happy and safe. So no matter what happened in the past, I'll be here to protect your future. A blush filling her cheeks, Erza felt a small tear in the corner of her eye. Thank you. Don't think. Sho began but froze when Naruto snapped his gaze at him. I won't harm you out of Erza's wishes. Naruto cut in as he glared at Sho with his anger returning. So you 4 stay right there and shut up. When I'm done talking to Erza, then I'll deal with you guys. His eyes then moving back to Erza, Naruto took a deep breath to calm himself. So Erza, go ahead. Start from the beginning. That's for today, so I end here.